Chris.
Councillor Chris Rosling Josephs, Councillor for Beighton Ward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Gary.
Good afternoon all. Councillor Gary Weatherall from Sheffield Green Brightside Ward.
Alan.
Alan Law, Firth Park Ward.
Peter Price.
Peter Price, Sheffield Green Brightside Ward.
Jack.
Afternoon, Councillor Jack Clarkson, Stocksbridge in the Upper Dom.
Roger.
Roger Davison, Ecclesall Ward.
And last but not least, Mike.
Good afternoon, Councillor Mike Chaplin for representing Southey Ward. I'm going to declare, have a declaration of interest.
Yeah, well, we're coming to those shortly, Councillor Chaplin. Yeah,
thank you.
Don't worry. Yeah, no worries at all. And as I said, I'm Councillor Jane Dunn, the chair, but I'm also a member of the Southey Ward. Okay, have we any for exclusion of the press or public, Abby? Any items?
Not today, Chair.
No. Declarations of interest. Before we go to declarations of interest, and in case there's members of the public here, so they don't have to waste their time, item 7E has been deferred. Okay, so item 7E. Thank you. We'll come to declarations of interest. So anything apart from the final item. Thank you. Any declarations of interest from anyone? No? Okay. So we'll go to minutes of the previous. Oh, sorry, Victoria. Sorry.
Sorry. I believe Councillor Clarkson wants to speak.
Oh, I am so sorry. I couldn't think the glare. I must, the light's gone a bit weird, so I might just have to adjust my screen, everybody. Sorry, Jack. How can I help you, Jack?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a declaration of interest regarding 49 Pavtowes Lane. I've made no determination, so hopefully I will be able to take part in the discussions.
Lovely. Okay, Councillor Law, thank you. Yeah.
Sorry, Chair. Jack's reminded me that I need to declare an interest as far as that case is concerned, being a Stockbridge Town Councillor.
Lovely.
But I'm commenting. I don't take part in the discussion or anything.
Okay, Abby.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just clarify with Councillor Clarkson what nature his interest is, please? And also, did Councillor Chaplin have one to declare?
Yes, but obviously not on any of the items because one item's been withdrawn, which is why I did it. Yeah, I announced that the 7E had gone before we got, so it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Apologies.
No, none at all. Yeah, that's fine. Jack, could you just clarify for Abby, please?
It's non-pecuniary interest.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? I do apologise. The light has gone really weird with, so it was a little bit glary on the screen. So I've just adjusted it. Okay. Right, okay, so declarations of interest, we can move on from that. We're going to go to minutes of the previous meeting. Okay. So, have you got anything to declare at all on page 1?
Chair.
Yeah.
Chair. Yes. Item 3.1. So previous declaration. So there's 2 changes I would like to make. I mean, firstly, in line 4, it's 1 club, so should be an apostrophe between the B and the S of clubs. But the line above, I don't live close to the site, so I don't think I said that. So could you delete "as he lived close to the site" and replace it with "as the site was close to the forward ward boundary," and was a local ward member for the club's other site.
Yeah. Thank you for the clarification, Councillor Sangar. Okay, so we're page 9. Yeah. Anything else on page 9? Page 10, 11. Okay, so I think we can say they're a true and accurate record. Okay, right, a site visit did take place for those, and just for members of the public and press, due to the pandemic, councillors do have the option to make the site visits in their own time if they so wish. Okay, so we'll go to the main part of the agenda now, and the first application we're considering is item 7A. which is 20/02551 RGS, formerly PP 08940474. The proposal is the retention of Pinston Street facade at City Mews and Palatine Chambers, demolition of buildings behind, erection of a 75-storey building for use as a hotel with ancillary restaurant, bar, use as classes C1, A3, A4, ground floor retail and cafe, restaurant units, classed as A1, A2, A3, A4 and associated works. Application under Regulation 3/1992. The location site is 18 to 42 Pinston Street at Barker's Pool House, Burgess Street, Sheffield, S1 2HN. And I'll hand over to Lucy Mond, who is the officer presenting today. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. I'll just share the screen so that we've got the presentation up in front of us. So, Chair, this is another phase of the Heart of the City jigsaw. This time it's a prominent site on Pinston Street, which comprises of Palatine Chambers, City Mews and then Barker's Pool House at the rear on Burgess Street. I'm sure members will be familiar with this site. The proposal is to demolish everything except the facades to Pinston Street and the northern return of Palatine Chambers, which is the element where there's a walkway through to that rear at the moment, which members will be aware of. So that's that northern facade there. And then it's to construct a new interlinked building to form a 4-star hotel with new shop fronts and a main entrance to Pinston Street, and a new modern interpretation of a mansard roof in standing seam copper. I'll show some images later when I've just finished the verbal presentation, Chair. The Burgess Street block will be largely constructed of a multi-red brick, so the replacement for the Burgess Street block at the back. And that will have feature brick and deep reveals to the windows. There would also be a courtyard between the front and the rear blocks. I will just flick down to the initial image of where the courtyard is, Chair. So that's that's in that location there that I'm just pointing out on the screen. So there would be a courtyard at the rear. Palatine Chambers and City Mews. I'll just flick up to the photographs of those, which are these buildings here. Are listed but significant buildings that are in the conservation area, the city centre conservation area. Barker's Pool House at the rear, which fronts onto the side of the John Lewis building, is not identified as a positive contributor to the character. And that's in the 1996 Sheffield City Centre Conservation Area appraisal. I think, Chair, the key issues in this case are weighing up the impact of the proposals on the heritage assets of the city centre conservation area, and that includes plenty of listed buildings, including the Grade 1 listed town hall. I'll just flick down to the image of the front there. And obviously the key issue in this case is weighing up the impact of the proposals on the heritage assets against the public benefits of the scheme overall. It's our view that the retention of the key facades, the reinstatement of the shop fronts onto Pinston Street, the replacement of the mansard roof with this new construction that you can see on this image here, will all enhance the setting of the key listed buildings, and as I say, most noticeably the Grade 1 listed town hall. Indeed, a new view of the public hall, the town hall and the Peace Gardens will be available from a rooftop restaurant in this kind of location here. So that'll give a new vista for members of the public to be able to view those important spaces. So the overall public benefits are very significant. This will deliver a 4-star hotel with modern retail units on the ground floor in this very prominent civic location. It will enhance the vitality and viability of the city centre, and it will regenerate this important area. These underused buildings will be redeveloped into a fully utilised complex. The setting of the town hall and the Peace Gardens will be enhanced, and the scheme will also meet or exceed the council's sustainable design policies. It will also connect into the district heating network. The design of the scheme will represent another high quality addition to the heart of the city, Chair. As well as this image to the front, I'll just flick to the back. That's there's a cutout of the central section which would show the small courtyard at the rear. And then this is the proposed new block that replaces Barker's Pool House at the back, so that fronts onto the side of John Lewis. And if I just flick up again, Chair, there's discussion about the frieze that has now been removed from Barker's Pool House at the back, and that is the one that's in storage and will be replaced elsewhere in the city centre, hopefully in another public realm project. So that's just to give members an image of that. And also I thought it was helpful just to take a couple of Google 3D images to show the rear area at the moment, which some members have probably walked through, and it's pretty dark and dingy and not very pleasant at the moment in the back there. And you can also see that the rear of those buildings have been substantially altered in the past. So Chair, if that's okay, I'll leave it at that and I'll stop sharing the screen now.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lucy, for that. We have two speakers for this application. We're speaking against the application. We have a Robin Hughes. Could we bring Robin in, please, Jay? Good afternoon, Mr. Robin. Nice to see you again.
Hello, good afternoon. Good to see everybody here again as well.
I know, yeah, lovely. You've got 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, Pinstone Street was the first of Sheffield Council's bold series of street improvements approved by Parliament in 1875. With these improvements, they cut a new and much wider route down to Moorhead. So to Stroke, they moved the focus of the old town of Sheffield from the riverside up to the top of Fargate. And that's what created the city centre that we know today. Now, the buildings that you see down the west side of Pinstone Street were constructed in just 15 years in the teeth of the long depression of 1873 to 96. And City Mews and Palatine Chambers were amongst the last to be built. I'll just give you a quick sketch of the history. So Reuben Thompson was Sheffield's great transport entrepreneur, and City Mews is his building. It's a transport hub that housed 50 carriages and had stabling for 90 horses, some of it upstairs. And it actually deserved the title Mews, which was originally a place where birds of prey were kept, but increased in scope to include the horses as well. And it's a horse accommodation, so the name's appropriate. And it opened in the first phase, opened in 1893 at the same time as Sheffield became a city, hence the name. Second phase is a couple of years later. Now, it was revolutionary in including apartments specifically aimed at working families. And it was predicted to be a disaster because working families were thought unwilling to live in flats. But in fact, they were oversubscribed many times over. So Palatine Chambers next door took up the idea in 1894. Same architects, Flockton and Gibbs. Gibbs actually put his own money into Palatine Chambers. Now, as all members will know, Sheffield and Rome are both built on 7 hills. And Palatine Hill in Rome is where legend locates the cave where its founders, Romulus and Remus, were suckled by the she-wolf. Now, this means the use of the name is a huge statement of confidence in what was an ambitious new city. So that's a thumbnail sketch of the importance of the buildings, which have largely been lost behind the facades. Given the rich heritage of these 2 buildings, I'm requesting an additional condition, which is for historical information displays. And members may remember condition 18 for Heart of the City 2, Block H3. I'm asking really for that to be replicated in this application as well. Now, I must say, although I'm speaking against, the design team's willingness to engage with the heritage community is commendable, and some design concerns have resulted in changes, so those are gratefully received. But I am sorry to say the outcome is disappointing behind the scenes. The courtyard design is especially underwhelming, and what's especially troubling is the total disregard of the surviving historic fabric that there is and the refusal to reuse materials from there. I'll go into a little more detail in a moment. Also, an impressed concrete decoration, which appeared to be a commitment during the consultation, was meant to echo the Mitchell frieze. That commitment seems to become ambiguous. Now, none of this justifies refusal, but I'm asking for some modest conditions. I do rather regret that an attempt was made to exclude that Bill Mitchell freeze from the application, so I welcome the condition for a firm plan to reuse it. That's very welcome. Now, that freeze was constructed using Faircrete. It was a pioneering material. The special thing about it was it could be worked with sculptor's tools while it was still wet. And in private correspondence with me, the artist has said that the concept does very much include the whole elevation of Barker's pool house. And that includes the panels, which are in the same material. Obviously, it can't be kept, but there should be firm plans to reuse these, ideally in association with the freeze. And the Burgess Street elevation is a totality, so it's been wrongly excluded from condition 3 and should be fully recorded. So I'm asking for those conditions. I'm also asking for something more specific in condition 22 to tie down this impressed concrete decoration that's supposedly inspired by the freeze. It's barely mentioned. I want to make sure it doesn't evaporate during the materials approval process. I also want to ensure that the historic fabric behind is properly acknowledged. And so again, the condition on building recording needs to point that out specifically. Then finally, the council has declared a climate emergency. Policy really needs to catch up with this. According to BREEAM, the construction industry accounts for 55% of all materials used. 55% of global industrial carbon emissions come from the manufacture of those materials. So if we're serious about this, we do have to learn to reuse buildings, limited possibility here. Where we can't, we must reuse materials, especially such as the original stone sets, bricks and ironworks that exist. So I'm asking for a condition in particular to reuse these. The sets could be reused on site, supplemented with reclaimed sets. They're easy to find and that should be added as a condition.
Thank you. On timer, I'm very impressed. Thank you. Thank you very much, Robin. Okay. The next speaker on this application is speaking on support, and it's Philip Watson. If we could bring Mr. Watson into the meeting, please. You can unmute Mr. Watson.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can now. Welcome. Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome to the meeting. You have 5 minutes. Just let me know when you're ready to start.
I'm ready to start. Good afternoon, everyone. As Lucy has mentioned, this proposal seeks to create a new high-quality hotel, conference and leisure facility that maximises the potential of this fantastic site located near to our renowned theatres and the City Hall. So we think this development is going to become a memorable destination for visitors to the nightlife of our city. And it will breathe new commercial life into the city too, activating Pinston Street with high quality street frontages that befit such a prominent civic facade. And the proposal is in accordance with adopted national and local planning policy. The development will include the demolition of Barker's Pool House and the retention of existing Victorian facades on Pinston Street, made up of City Mews and Palatine Chambers, with a new rooftop extension that will replace the poorly constructed existing roof. Along Pinston Street, commercial space is proposed along with the principal pedestrian entrance to the hotel and conference and banqueting facilities, and successive floors are reserved for a further hotel lobby off Burgess Street with views through to the courtyard, and 154 hotel rooms with an ambitious new restaurant bar at roof level that takes advantage of the fabulous views over the Peace Gardens and will be publicly accessible. The team are acutely aware of the importance of the site and its surrounding historical context, and as Robin has acknowledged, we've consulted widely in pre-application discussions with planning officers, urban designer, and the local community, including heritage groups. You will have noted that the committee report states that the proposal will enhance the conservation area and the setting of nearby listed buildings and the character of the conservation area, and has the support of Historic England, who state that new and old are brought together to create a renewed urban environment. The proposal seeks to retain and enhance historic facades along Pinston Street and provides a contemporary and sympathetic roofscape as identified in the committee report. Furthermore, scale is in keeping with buildings adjacent on Pinston Street. The mansard roof form to the rooftop bar restaurant was developed through extensive pre-application advice from the planning department and as a response to the historic roof forms of the original City Mews and Palatine Chambers buildings, whilst echoing the mansard roof of the adjacent Town Hall chambers. Subtle changes in the proposed mansard roof along its length respond to steps in the facade that differentiate between City Mews and Palatine Chambers. This reinforces the individual character of these historic facades. The proposed mansard roof height is at a minimum to enable the rooftop bar and restaurant to function properly, with a modest 2.7 metre internal ceiling height. The roof is also stepped back from the parapet by 2 metres to create a viewing terrace, and this will reduce the apparent height of the roof when it's viewed from street level and from across the Peace Gardens. The height of the roof over Palatine Chambers is similar to that of the original Victorian mansard roof and lower than the adjacent Town Hall Chambers and Pinstone Chambers buildings. The proposed roof form has echoes of the original Victorian roof without resorting to pastiche, and its proportions have been carefully considered to present a balanced composition to the Pinston Street. With regard to the proposed elevations facing the courtyard at the centre of the development, we've deliberately adopted a typically restrained Victorian strategy of treatment to secondary facades. We've proposed precast concrete banding that will match the stone banding on Pinston Street as Palatine Chambers turns inwards towards the courtyard, and regular window positions reflect the hotel typology and embellished with splayed reveals. The courtyard is further enhanced with a projecting brick banding at the ground floor to separate this element as a ground floor plinth. As members will be aware, the existing courtyard contains many retaining wall barriers and level changes which make it difficult to access. In contrast, the proposed courtyard will provide inclusive level access and an urban oasis of attractively designed soft and hard landscape that will be the focal point for the hotel. To conclude, this proposal retains and improves active frontage to Pinston Street. It reduces a new publicly accessible rooftop bar and restaurant. It welcomes the Radisson Blue to a historic part of the city, and it balances new and old in a considered piece of urban design. And I encourage you to support this scheme and support the continued reinvigoration of our city centre. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Another one on time. Well done. Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to open this up to questions now by members. Any questions? I have Councillor Garbett. Oh, sorry, Victoria, do you want to come in first?
You can give Lucy a chance to come back.
Oh, yeah, so sorry, my fault. Yeah, Lucy, sorry. Lucy, do you want to respond first before missing you out, Lucy?
It's okay, thank you, Chair. Easily done. Chair, in terms of a few of the points that Robin raised, he requested an additional condition about historical information displays. Now, we have thought about this because we've obviously thought about this for the whole range of Heart of the City proposals that you've seen, and in this case, we're kind of wondering where that would really sit on this scheme, because there isn't an easy place for it to sit. You could possibly put something within the hotel foyer, but clearly that would depend on whether that was acceptable to the hotel. I mean, one of the things I thought about is that obviously we've got the condition 28 for the re-erection of the William Mitchell frieze, and I wondered whether the interpretation ought to go with that, but I suppose then that misses out the interpretation of the Pinston Street block. I think it's really for members to decide whether they want that condition. It's just that we did give it some thought, and there wasn't an easy public place to put the interpretation, because obviously there's there's shop fronts across the whole of Pinston Street, for example. So it's something we thought about, but we weren't sure how you could really incorporate that properly in this scheme. In terms of the building recording, including Barker's Pool House, that has been recorded already, but I have no objection to, if members wanted to specifically say something about that in condition 3, there isn't any objection, it has already been done. in terms of the concrete decoration, I think, as I understood it, Mr. Hughes was talking about the reuse of the other elements of concrete decoration from Barker's Pool House, and that isn't something that forms part of this scheme. I don't think that's something that could be insisted upon. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to see. Oh, one of the other, I think, main concerns was the reuse of sets in the courtyard area. I think the problem with that is that they wouldn't give really good accessibility for people with disabilities. So the new sets will be of natural materials, but it won't be reuse of the existing ones because of the problems that creates for disabled people to access the space. So it certainly will be an attractive area, but there isn't a proposal. There aren't enough sets to reuse them to create that space in any event. So that is something that was considered but rejected. I think those were the main points. I'm sure other issues will come out in members' questions, Chair.
I've been so good, it's because I keep coughing, so I got it on silent. I've got Councillor Garbett down for a question and Councillor Davidson. Did anybody else want to ask a question? Indicate now. Councillor Rosalind Josephs. Okay, just 3 at the moment. If I hand over to Councillor Garbett then, please.
Thank you. I've got quite a few.
Okay.
I'll start with the courtyard. It is, I mean, there is a yard there at the moment, and it is very dark. It's surrounded on all sides by tall buildings. And I have no doubt that there is going to be an effort to make it lighter and more appealing, but I'd want to have more information about how that's going to happen. I think I'm quite concerned that it might be a wasted opportunity at some stage, because overall I think the scheme is pretty good, and I'd like to make it as good as possible. Shall I ask all of them at once? Shall I ask all my questions at once?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I'd echo what Robin Hughes says about reusing the materials. But I'll do it. He mentioned the climate emergency we're in, and I'll do it from that point of view, which you might expect. We do need to make sure that we are doing this in a way that is as climate friendly as possible. And there will be a lot of materials, some of it not reusable, but there will be some reusable materials, and I'd like to see some effort at actually making use of these, either in this development or put aside to be reused in another development somewhere else, rather than create using new concrete and new bricks. Third question, disability access within the building. You've talked about disability access in the courtyard, and I understand that. Within the building itself, obviously, it's did you say 5- and 7-story building? So there will be lift access. It's more the rooms than, the hotel rooms than the actual access to the floors. I think I read that there were some rooms put aside. Can you confirm that that's the case? And to what extent are they available to all people with all different disabilities? So that's that question.
Okay, is that it then?
I'm just going down my notes here. Oh yes, I've had something about the noise on deliveries. Is there a plan on deliveries to the shops and to the hotel regarding the noise on that? Yeah.
Right, Lucy. Thank you very much, Councillor Garbett. Lucy.
Chair, in terms of the courtyard, we have got a fully worked up scheme for the courtyard, and rather than being a public courtyard, it is a courtyard for use by the hotel. So unlike the Peace Gardens, for example, which is a is a public open space, it is a spill out space really for the conferencing facilities for the hotel, and it is high quality natural materials, lots of lighting features as well. So we do have I haven't got an image that I can show you a bit in detail, but we have got a detailed landscape scheme for that. So you're quite right to point out that that space is dark and dingy at the moment, so it's never going to be penetrated by huge amounts of sunlight. So they certainly do need to do things to brighten it up. But the fact that it will have public sort of facing rooms, conference rooms, you know, cafes, that type of thing, spill out spaces onto there would make it a much more attractive space in the first instance. But yeah, certainly that is true. It's not going to get an awful lot of sunlight, but the surface materials and the design of it will be high quality. In terms of reuse of materials and a climate emergency, this scheme is actually going to be a very sustainable scheme. They're aiming for BREEAM excellent as opposed to BREEAM very good, which is the current council requirement. And also because they connect into the district heating system, which is hotels can easily connect into that because it does make a lot of sense for hot water and heating. It means that actually, I think in carbon reduction terms, it's probably in the order of over 30%, which is far higher than the 10% requirement that we have under the current policy. So, I mean, in terms of reuse of materials, most materials these days are recycled in any event, because there's a requirement to do that, and the BREEAM excellent rating would require a lot of that. But they're not really suitable to reuse in this particular building project, but they would end up being reused elsewhere because most materials do have to be recycled these days. Disabled access within the building, yes, there's lift access, and there are 5% fully mobility compliant bedrooms. So those are accessible, and I think that's based on the client Radisson Blu. The demand for those is less than 5%, so they've gone above the requirement from clients, if you like, but it is below the usual British standard, but we don't have a policy requirement in the local plan. So that 5% we think is a reasonable number. There is a delivery management plan condition, so the noise would be picked up as part of that delivery management plan, because that would include that, and it would include the highways issues as well. So so that is covered in the conditions.
Thank you. Councillor Garbett. Okay.
No, that's fine.
Lovely.
Two things to come back on. The disability rooms, you said that for mobility, they're there for people with mobility problems. Are there any with people with visual impairment problems? Because quite obviously there are people with visual impairments who might want to use this hotel. The other is just a suggestion, by the way, about where to put the displays. I don't know if it's
more of a comment than
just
a
across
question.
the road. Possibly, yeah.
Is this a comment?
I'll come back on a comment.
Yeah, I'll bring you back in for a comment at the end.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if you could just respond to the disability question, please, Lucy. Thank you.
Chair, the disability bedrooms would be designed to the British standards, though I can't, you know, I don't know the exact configurations in terms of visual impairment, but they are done to the British standards for any hotel mobility bedrooms.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Davidson, your questions, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy with the recycling one. I was going to put that one, but the other question was, we know that there's no facilities for parking, but would the courtyard would that be used for taxis, so that people are not having to walk to, say, Barker's Pool, either, you know, from a taxi or to a taxi? Will they be able to go straight from the hotel? And the other thing is, where would coaches be parking if there were a coach party of people? Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, I think that's for Helen. That's for Helen to answer, Chair. There is a drop-off facility, but I'll let Helen answer.
Lovely, Helen.
Hi, Chair. Thank you. Yes, there is a drop-off and pick-up facility lay-by that will be on the Burgess Street frontage. So obviously taxis can pick up and drop off there. It's also going to be used for servicing as well. There is also going to be partially a taxi rank on Burgess Street. So I think, you know, in terms of access for taxis, that is quite acceptable. I would think as well that if we do get coaches, then again the pick up and drop off point would be available for people to be dropped off there. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor
Yeah, that's
Davidson,
fine,
lovely.
thank you.
No, yeah, lovely. Councillor Rosalind Joseph, you had questions?
Yeah, Councillor Davidson asked my questions about the pick up and drop off, Chair, but I do have comments as well.
Lovely. I'll pop you down for a comment after Councillor Garbutt. Any more questions from the committee? Did you indicate Councillor McCann? No. No. Okay, then we'll go to comments. So far, I have Councillor Garbutt and Councillor Rosalind Joseph. I see Councillor Price has indicated. Councillor McCann. Anyone else? Since I seem to be having blind spots today, so I want to make sure I don't miss anybody out. Lovely. We'll go ahead then. Councillor Garbutt, your comment.
Yeah, like I say, I think this is a very positive proposal, and I will be voting for it. The historical displays, I was going to suggest across the road in the Peace Gardens or just on the pavement by the Peace Gardens. I don't know if that's a possibility at all, or if that's going to be too impeding on the progress of people on foot. Yes, I like this development, partly because I think Sheffield needs to sell itself a lot more, and therefore will need a lot more hotel space, partly because the way it's being developed is very climate friendly compared with many developments. I'm quite concerned about the frieze because I think it needs to be displayed, it needs to be there. So I'm really pleased to see that the condition is in there. I'm just concerned to make sure that it actually happens, because those conditions sometimes, you know, they don't sometimes. So, yep, I'm going to be voting for this.
Lovely, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Rosalind Joseph.
Yeah, Chair, I've got to say, I was thinking very similar to Councillor Garbutt about the information being on pins on the opposite side, on near the Peace Gardens. The NMTF have a plaque on the ground on the opposite side of the road to where they were first initiated 100 odd years ago, which is now the co-op building. So it would be interesting to put that that there, so that people can actually look at the whole building rather than stand next to the building and read it. So it was just that comment, Chair. But I also think it's an exciting development, and I wish it luck, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's brilliant. I think, and I agree with Lucy, it's another piece of that jigsaw in regenerating the city centre to an exciting new city. It retains the heritage frontage, which is great. It provides more footfall for the retailers in the city centre, with all the people who will stay there. It does also demonstrate the confidence that developers and investors have in the city centre. Many city centres are struggling at the moment, and I think this is a great example, if you like, and great credit to the city that we're still attracting major developers who can see a long-term future in it. And so I welcome it, Chair. I think it's a great development. It's retained that wonderful heritage frontage. And I think the sooner it's built, the better, Chair. So I'm going to fully support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Councillor McCann, you're the last one I've got down today.
Thank you, Chair. On a similar vein, yes, I'm glad to see that the frontage has been retained, because I get so disappointed with around Sheffield, and we've lost so many of our old buildings and a lot of our heritage, because the Sheffield I grew up in essentially doesn't exist anymore. So I do think it's important that we keep buildings like this, at least the front is a facade, and build behind it, which is, well, I'll put it acceptable. So I will be supporting this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it has been exciting being on the committee, I think, during the pandemic, when we've seen such, you know, every single committee, we seem to get another piece of this jigsaw puzzle coming through. And it is kind of, when you see how Sheffield is probably one of the only cities that's actually developing itself at the time of the pandemic, how we're actually building, moving forward. So it is really, really exciting. So thank you for all your questions and your comments. We'll go to the vote now. Oh, sorry, Lucy, did you want to come back on the condition part?
Chair, it's just that a couple of people have mentioned the possibility of an additional condition on an interpretation material. So I think you'd have to have a proposer and a seconder for that, and then vote on that before
right,
the
yeah, I was
main-
going to say,
before the main
lovely.
item.
Thank you. Before we go
yeah.
into the vote, I was going to, you know, go back and ask that. Victoria, would you like to come in before we do that?
I'm just conscious that I think the suggested condition is to do something on some land which is outside the actual red line boundary of the application. And I just wondered if the planning officer wanted to comment on that aspect.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, Chair, what I was going to suggest if you were going to go was that we did a condition that said something like arrangements be entered into to provide for some interpretation material, and not specify which site, because then it can could possibly be the hotel or the Peace Gardens. Obviously, that is council ownership, but I think if we said arrangements to be entered into, similar to the highways conditions that you see, it allows some flexibility, if you like.
I can see Councillor Garbett raising. Are you going to, Councillor Garbett?
I shall propose that.
Lovely. So do we have a seconder for the proposal? We have Councillor Chaplin who wishes to second that. Okay, so just to double check with Victoria, do we have to vote on this condition first, or do we vote on the main substantive, or can it just be added into the vote that we're going to move forward to?
You need to vote to add the condition in first.
Okay, that's fine. I'm just double checking just to make, lovely. So we need to go to vote for this vote on the condition. Are we all clear what the condition is before we move? Okay, so to support the condition, Councillor Sangar?
For Chair.
Councillor Dams? Can't find his mute button. You're still muted, Tony. It's not often we can keep him quiet, is it, at the committee? We'll come back to Councillor.
I'm back for.
Lovely. Councillor Garbett.
For.
Councillor McCann.
For, Chair.
Councillor Naz. Can't hear you, Councillor Naz. For. Yeah. Councillor Rosalind Josephs.
For, Chair.
Councillor Weatherall.
For, Chair.
Councillor Law.
For, Chair.
Councillor Price.
For.
Councillor Clarkson. You've got him quiet as well.
Is it me? My turn,
Yes,
Chair?
It is, Councillor
I'm sorry,
Clarkson.
it froze. For, Chair.
Lovely. Councillor Davidson.
For, Chair.
And Councillor Chaplin.
For, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. So we have supported the condition. Okay, we'll go to the main. Oh, sorry, sorry, Lucy. Go on.
Chair, I was just going to suggest that if I agree the wording with you, Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's okay. You're looking after me today. You're looking after me. I really appreciate it. Right, I was going to say, if committee agrees to the fact that we'll work the wording out together in keeping with what you've said, that's great. Otherwise, you can hold me to account. So we'll go to the main part now. Okay, the application, the proposal is to grant conditionally. Those in favour, if you could let me, if you're for or against, Councillor Sangar.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Dans.
For.
Councillor Garbett.
For.
Councillor McCann.
For.
Councillor Naz.
For.
Councillor Rosalind Josephs.
For.
Councillor Weatherall.
For.
Councillor Law.
For.
Councillor Price.
For.
Councillor Clarkson.
For.
Councillor Davidson.
For.
And Councillor Chaplin.
For.
Okay, so that is granted. Thank you very much, everyone, and thank you for your contributions. Okay, we'll move on to item 7B. Okay, we just need to bring in Chris. Could we bring Chris Healy in? That's great, lovely. Item 7B, okay. which is 20/00402/FUL, formerly PP 084111577. It's a full planning application. The proposal is the erection of 4-storey 80-bed care home, use class C2 with associated car parking and landscaping and some vendor drawings. The location is the land between 216 and 288 Twentywell Lane, Sheffield S174QF. And the officer is Chris Healy. Chris, if you'd like to present, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Your sound's very, very, very quiet, Chris. So before we start.
Can you hear me any better now?
Can everyone hear him well enough? Can we just, yeah. Okay, that's fine then. I just wanted to make sure before you went in full flow.
Yeah, sorry about that. So there is some additional supplementary information that members should have seen. It's item 1 on the supplementary information. There are 2 additional representations, one from the Bradway Action Group and one from a resident of Kenwell Drive. The reasons for objection are listed there. They're largely in response to the officer report that's since its publication, and don't raise any particularly new issues. They're just really responding to that. I don't think there's anything that we need to add to that, Chair, and our response here is that, that the comments that have been made are addressed within the committee report itself. There is just one thing to point out, which is a typographical error in the conditions. The numbering of the conditions is out. It goes 17/8/19. So the condition that is number 18 on page 56 is incorrectly labelled as condition 8. So it should read 17/18/19, obviously.
Okay.
I'll just very quickly flick through some images, Chair, on the presentation. I'm aware that we might have a number of speakers, so I think rather than go into too much detail on this, I'll keep this quite brief, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
So can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. So this is the site. 20Well Lane, members that are familiar with it will know that the Bradway shops are up at this end, and then there's a quite steep fall down 20Well Lane towards Aberdale Road, and at this point here there's an access into the site here, which is where access to the land would be taken. There are residential properties all the way around the site at varying distances. And as can be seen on the next slide, the site is currently largely open, with quite an amount of tree cover on it. No buildings of any note, apart from 1 or 2 kind of buildings that have seen better days towards the frontage, but nothing that is occupied, used for storage and things like that. Sorry, my screen's taking time to. So these are some images of the site, taken centrally, looking out towards the various properties around the perimeter. They're labelled there, so there's a little point in me kind of repeating what they say. These are obviously taken when the trees aren't in leaf, but it gives you a good impression of some of the distances involved. The bottom right-hand image here is obviously the access point that would be improved as part of this. The left-hand image looking back up 20Well Lane towards the shops at the top, and this image to the right here is a view that you see across number 288 20Well Lane, which is a relatively new or remodeled property facing the space. So the building would sit in this space here. the last image we were looking at is taken roughly from this position here. So that's why you would see this portion of the building. The trees are largely retained on the site within the numbers and groupings and what have you, but the trees are largely retained. There's a tree preservation order down this kind of southeastern corner, which is left intact. The report refers to two groups of trees that are removed. One is quite a small group of trees, only up to about 3 meters high in this position here. That's G70 in the report. And then there is G48, which is a group roughly in this position here. And this is the nearest property to the site here, number 15. And again, the report goes into quite some detail over 2 or 3 pages on the distances involved from property to property. There are 2 slides here showing elevations. The first one is the elevation facing 20well Lane, effectively, albeit screened by existing buildings and trees to some degree. So it's 4 stories in height along the majority of its length, but because of the topography, it runs to almost a single story at this end, and drops to 3 at this end because that's where it starts to get close to some of the properties to the north. So that's the elevation facing 20well Lane. This is the elevation that you would see from, I'll just skip back up, from here. So that's this elevation here. And then these are the flipped elevations on the other side. So this elevation here faces the properties on St Quentin Mount View and Rise, and this is the elevation that faces the properties on Kenwell Drive. There are some cross sections which I'm afraid are a little faint, and I've done my best to try and explain those. You won't be able to read the dimensions on here. They are within the report, and I do have them noted if people are interested in those. So these are showing the relationships with the building, sorry, the relationship of the building with properties all the way around the edge. So there are two slides here that show that. So in terms of it, sorry, actually, I should have said right at the very beginning, it's within the description, but just to make clear, it's an 80-bed care home, and there are 34 car parking spaces, with the main access being from 20well Lane, and the car parking in this location here. There's a formal garden for residents here, and otherwise the building occupies the remainder of the site. I'll stop sharing now, Chair. Oh no, so I'll leave it on in case you, and I'll flick through while people are talking as much as I can.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, thank you, Chris. We have a number of speakers on the application. The first speaker I have, and we're taking speakers against first, is a David Russell. Jay, could you bring David into the meeting? I think you may have to stop sharing your screen because I don't know whether I can see everybody. That's all.
I have just thought that, Chair, I'm sorry.
Yeah, lovely, thank you. No rush at all. Thank you. Mr. Russell, I'm just waiting.
Oh, hello. Sorry about that.
No, Mr. Russell, not a problem at all.
Yeah, a bit
So, are you ready? No, it's okay. You have 5 minutes. Just let me know when you wish to start. I will tell you 10 seconds before the end.
Okay.
You know, so you can wind up.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, my name's David Russell. I thank the chair and members and officers of the subcommittee of the committee for letting me say some words regarding the application. I've lived on 20well Lane since 1975, just a few houses below the proposed entrance of the site, and I've been a practicing architect for 40 years. My concern and objection to this proposal is its massive negative effect on the character of the area, the failure to address this during the design, the failure to engage with the community throughout the design process, the failure to provide modelling to show the building's true impact on the locality, the inconsistency of the recommendation in the report in relation to other applications in the vicinity, and the fairly insignificant mitigation measures that have been offered. I'll start by saying I don't really have a problem. Excuse me. I don't really have a problem with the design itself, but I just feel it's the wrong type of development for the site. It's my main concern is it's grossly out of character, and if approved, the character of 20 Lane and the surrounding streets will be fundamentally changed beyond repair, and the amenity of many residents will be seriously reduced. Over the 45 years I've lived here, I've recognised the distinct character of the lane, both inherently, but also how it sets the scene for the whole of Bradway, as it is the main approach into the many residential streets of Bradway. It has a distinct rural flavour, although it's suburban in use. Much of the character is due to the mature trees that line stretches of the lane. The houses are predominantly set well back with cars, drives and house approaches set back from the road, hidden behind mature planting. The houses are distinct villa-like and are mostly medium-sized detached or semi-detached houses, each with its own character. Swathes of trees extend down from the wooded areas of the golf courses, Lady Springs Wood, and the round walk down across the road, around the houses. As I say, in some places, the vegetation jumps over the road and extends the wooded rural field well up into the traditional streets of Bradway. I feel the character of Bradway is incredibly richer because of the character of the lane. I've been pleased to see that planning negotiations and decisions in the past have recognised this and have led to appropriate final decisions. Applications both at 290 and 209 20 Lane have either been refused or significantly altered because they did not fit with this character. Indeed, the previous application for a single bungalow on the site we're talking about was approved because it was in line with policy CS31 of the core strategy. My concern is this proposal, which is more extreme in my view, has now been recommended for approval. And the recommendations under this policy, CS31, have been ignored. Just to say, when I first came to Sheffield, people used to talk about how Sheffield was a city, but it was a collection of villages. And I think what is meant by that, and I think someone in the previous presentation has mentioned it, with Sheffield being built on 7 hills, the hills and the valleys create very different environments and micro environments that create very different feels for neighbours, and you have neighbours very close to each other with very different feels. I feel this is what is behind policy CS31, and it's about maintaining the quality of that character across different areas. I feel that if this policy isn't properly dealt with, particularly on this site, not only does it affect the residents of Bradway, but it whittles away some of the essence of Sheffield. If you've had chance to look at the 250 well-structured and relevant objections posted, you'll see that many of them are rooted back to the fact that this development is alien to the character.
Got 10 seconds.
Oh, my apologies.
Sorry, you just need, if you just summarise, you know, you can just
again, as
summarise.
I said before, I just feel that the mitigations are poor, that they are minor in their effect. I feel that the proposal should be reduced because of this damage to the character.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, no worries at all. We got the gist. Thank you very much. Okay, the next speaker is Joe Mallows. If we could take Mr. Russell out and bring Joe Mallows in. Thank you. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn.
You're welcome. Okay, you've got 5 minutes. I will tell you about 10 seconds. Do you know? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So good afternoon, Chair, Councillors, officers of the committee. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm Joe Mallows, one of the Bradway Neighbours Group, and I'm going to focus on issues of loss of amenity and the irreparable harm that the proposed care home complex would bring to our community if approved. By its very nature, the form and function of an 80-bed care complex and its impact are massively different in scale and type from residential housing. And this is a critical consideration that's been ignored throughout. I'm speaking to you from my living room at 288 20well Lane, a sustainable, eco-friendly home that we self-built in the boundary of our existing property. We're really privileged to live here and to have positively added to the landscape and our surroundings. And I really wish we were here in a position of supporting an application for affordable, sustainable starter homes on that site, meeting the genuine needs within the city, but we're in a very different circumstances. So the large window directly behind me faces southwest to maximise sunlight, which we need to heat our passive house designed home. It also faces directly onto the site. So if the care complex was to be built, we'd have the equivalent of almost 6 stories overshadowing us, leading to loss of light, but also heating, which is a point that the case officer acknowledges but doesn't feel is material. I disagree. The officer also believes that standard separation distances as used for regular housing of similar proportions are an appropriate measure, and that this should counter concerns of overlooking and privacy. Again, I feel this is wrong. It's hard to appreciate if you stand in the middle of the site and with the inadequate 3D modelling that's been provided, just how big the building would be. It would tower 21 feet over the eaves of our house. So we'd have the full height of the building and the main entrance directly opposite both our living room and our large bedroom window immediately below. The officer's report concedes that the proposal would lead to some loss of light, but states this is largely within acceptable levels. In whose opinion? The daylight and sunlight assessment provided by the applicants themselves shows that tolerance levels would be exceeded for our bedroom window, but further 5 windows over at 15 St Quentin's Mount. And yet the officer brushes this aside and claims incorrectly that the affected rooms are non-sensitive. There are 19 immediate neighbouring homes that share a site boundary and would have a direct relationship to the care complex. The outlook of neighbours is a material consideration for planning decisions. How we use our space and the freedom with which we live our lives would be damaged beyond repair. There are unwritten rules and conventions as to how we live in our homes that makes it comfortable and acceptable to us all. But those conventions don't apply to residential care complexes. 35 bedroom windows would face our house alone, all with elderly residents heavily reliant on those windows for their view onto the world, onto us. It's heartbreaking whichever way you look at it. Neighbours would suffer unacceptable loss of privacy, amenity, space and daylight. The care complex would generate a massive amount of disturbance, artificial light and pollution. A plant room generating noise 24 hours a day, just 30 metres away. Car parking along the entire length of our northwest boundary and an electricity substation. Neighbours will be subjected to emissions from the commercial kitchens making meals for 100 people, residents and staff 3 times a day, emissions from commercial laundry and heating, emissions from cars and lorries, light pollution, because the complex can need to be brightly lit 24 hours a day, internally, externally. Many of these issues are addressed in the lengthy conditions section of the officer's report. Limits to decibels of plant equipment, etc. But all these individual conditions fail to take account of the cumulative effect of the entire operation. The report states that the commercial deliveries and collections shall be carried out only between 7 in the morning and 11 o'clock at night in the interests of occupiers of adjoining properties. This is not in our interest. It's totally
10
unacceptable.
seconds.
So the officer's reports fail to balance the interests, prioritising potential future users and failing to acknowledge the irreparable harm the development would inflict on existing neighbours and the wider community. Ultimately, the harm caused by granting planning permission would significantly, demonstrably outweigh the benefits. And on that basis, we oppose the application and ask elected members to do the same.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jo. Okay, if Jo could leave the meeting and we bring us Sarah Featherstone in, please. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello, hi, can you hear me okay?
We certainly can. You have 5 minutes. I will tell you 10 seconds before, do you know?
Okay.
So, yeah, lovely. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair, members and officers of the community. My name's Sarah and I live in one of the 19 houses that immediately adjoin the site. This country has an ageing population and the natural conclusion might be to build more care homes, but statistics from the ONS show that the number of people living in specialist retirement housing or in care homes is relatively low. Most older people live in their own homes. Only 4% of people aged 65 and over live in care homes. The average age of a care home resident is 87 years old, and just 9% of the population is 85 or over. To serve this small percentage of the community, there are currently 19 functioning care homes in South West Sheffield alone, so we would argue that the need in this area has already been met. Were you to approve this proposal, given that it is a care home and not a nursing home, it will not have specialist nurses on site. This means it will place further strain on local services which are already stretched to breaking point. The site is not near to either of the Sheffield's main hospitals and the nearest GPs are a mile away in Greenhill or Totley. The build of a prestige care home complex, which is in essence a 5-star hotel for people with low-level need, can in no way be described as fulfilling an urgent housing need. That it will be marketed as a prestige home will serve to further reinforce assumptions about S17 and widen the divide between the southwest side of Sheffield and other areas of the city. The planning officer's report says that the site for the 80-bed care home complex is appropriate because it's near to a shopping centre and close to bus routes. Yet later in the report, he says that the steep gradient of 21 Lane will not be an issue because residents will be in mobility scooters or will enjoy the grounds of the complex. This recognises many Bradway residents' fears that the elderly occupants will not be able to be part of our community, as 21 Lane is utterly unsuitable for mobility scooters. Then we turn to the current pandemic, which is very much a care home issue. A major study published in The Lancet showed that in homes with fewer than 20 residents, the chance of an outbreak was 5%. But in homes with 60 to 80 residents, the likelihood soared to between 83 and 100%. Close to 40% of all COVID deaths in May were among care home residents. This may not be a planning issue, but it is an issue facing Sheffield residents. 3 of the speakers here today have cared for their elderly parents at home rather than in a care home, and the new focus on working from home will allow people to do this more readily. How many would risk the health of their loved ones by exposing them to such infection rates? This proposal cannot be considered without reference to public health. The officer writes, it would be a positive contribution to the city's obligation to maintaining a 5-year supply of deliverable housing. We suspect that if you ask the majority of Sheffield voters what they would consider to be the city's housing priority, they would say starter homes, particularly as 29% of Sheffield's population are aged between 18 and 39. Report after report from respected bodies such as the King's Foundation, the Centre for Policy on Ageing and the Centre for Ageing Better have found that the best care for elderly people is in their home as part of a community and surrounded by and cared for by the people they know and trust and that the care home is an outdated model. Sheffield City Council is currently conducting the Care Homes for Older People and Adult Social Care Strategic Review, the consultation period for which is due to close on the 29th of November. Surely assessing whether permission should be granted should at least be postponed until this review is completed and the findings are published. We are representatives of a group of Bradway residents who are fortunate enough to have the skills and resources to contest the application at the level of detail required by the planning approval process. We have access to 3D modelling software and computers, time to read reports and research articles, the confidence to motivate neighbours to organise a public meeting to present here today to you, and yet we still feel marginalised and steamrolled. We are appalled at the use of value judgments dismissing the impact this will have on residents as negligible, all of which have been made without a publicly available 3D rendering. This is the view I will see out of the window behind me. As councillors, you represent all of Sheffield, and we need to know that you hear us. This development will be huge. Think secondary school, or office block, or hospital unit, and you might imagine the horror we feel. We appeal to you to recognise that this development is unnecessary, inappropriate to the site, potentially damaging to the health and well-being of over 70 people who share a boundary with the site and amongst the wider community.
10 seconds.
We urge you to vote against this proposal and take a positive step towards using sites like this as an opportunity to tackle inequalities and diversify communities by developing them sensitively. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. The next speaker we have is Councillor Martin Smith. Councillor Smith, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay?
We certainly can, Martin. You've got 5 minutes.
All right, that shouldn't take that long. Nice to see everybody. My name's Martin Smith. I'm a local councillor for Dore and Totney. I should also say I also live on 20 Well Lane, for clarity, but not close to the site. I'm not on any of the maps that was shown earlier on by Chris. So speaking as a ward councillor, it's clearly a controversial planning application that's received a very large number of objections from local residents. It's all about the presence of such a huge building on that particular site, its impact on the immediate environment, plus a few highways issues that have generated such a massive response from the local community. And indeed, a planning officer's report that contains more than 10 pages of conditions. I personally have never seen that many conditions on an infill development in a housing area before. The site also has a long and contentious planning history. And indeed, a few years ago, there was an application that included a 4-storey block of flats on that very piece of land that was turned down by the council, and a decision that was upheld by the planning inspectorate. The ecological impact of the site is also well known, and I'm pleased to see that the planning officer's report accept that the site is...
Can I just pause you there just for a second? I'm going to pause. We've just lost 2 councillors, and I want to make sure that that they can contribute into the debate, because it's really important. Just councillor, no worries at all. Hi, Councillor Weatherall, Councillor Price. Did you manage to hear all of that? Lovely. It's just to make sure, because legally we have to. I want you to be part of the debate.
Understood.
Fantastic. I'm really sorry, Martin.
That's fine.
Yeah, but I have paused it. Thank you. Carry on.
Keep going. Okay. So the site's got a long and contentious planning history. A few years ago, an application that included a 4-storey block of flats on the same piece of land was turned down by the council, decision that was upheld by the planning inspectorate. I'm pleased to see the planning officer's report accepts that the site is used for foraging and commuting by badgers and a wide variety of other wildlife. I'm slightly disappointed that didn't feature more prominently in their recommendation. A few highways issues, particularly the risk of overspill parking onto 20well Lane. People that have visited the site will have seen it's a very steep slope, a blind brow of a hill, one very narrow pavement outside the development that people use to walk their kids to the local primary school. So I have a concern about that. But the main reason I object is the building's massive. It's a 4-storey, a high 4-storey building. And indeed, the planning officer's report accepts that it clearly exceeds the height of other buildings, every other building in the immediate vicinity. And in my opinion, the cumulative impact of height, scale, massing, and the design of the building would have an unacceptable overbearing impact on neighbouring properties, particularly the residents of 288 20well Lane, the one that Joe was presenting on earlier on. In addition to that building's height, it overlooks the residents' principal habitable living space. Its outdoor amenity area, it would be overlooked by a large number of windows, and the rooftop terrace on a care home. And just a point of information, Chris was showing us the tree cover. Most of it is not legally protected. In particular, my understanding is that the tree cover, such as it exists between the building and 288, does not have any legal protection whatsoever. Councillors, I suggest that in this instance, the simple distance and angle calculation referred to in the planning officer's report doesn't adequately reflect the cumulative impact of the height, massing and design of the building on neighbouring residents. And for that reason, I urge you to reject this particular application. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm sorry for the interruption.
No problem.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. If we could remove Councillor Smith and bring in Alison Patrick, who is the final speaker against this application today. Welcome, Alison. Okay. Can
Hello.
you hear me? Okay, welcome. Are you ready? And I'll start. You've got 5 minutes and I'll warn you just before, 10 seconds before.
Okay,
the end.
thank you.
Thank you.
So good afternoon. I'm Alison Patrick, a member of the Bradway Neighbours Group, and I also live next to the site on its western boundary. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. I'm going to focus on environmental concerns, loss of biodiversity and the open space policy. On reading the planning officer's report, one thing struck me in relation to the environmental concerns raised by our community. The fact that the report sought to focus on some minor issues of sustainability with regards to the building itself, but gave little consideration to the task of balancing the needs of elderly care against the importance of protecting a significant open space. As a consequence, the report and the subsequent recommendations lack strategic insight and balance. One case in point is the application of the open space policy. It is our belief that this has been applied incorrectly. The officer considers that because the site is located within a housing policy area, it does not fall within the definition of open space. This is not true. The officer also determines that the site does not fall within the definition of open space for the purposes of the National Planning Policy Framework. Also not true. The space is considered to be, by us, of high public value, as demonstrated by the huge number of objections, and provides a significant amount of visual amenity and green space to the neighbourhood. There are numerous examples across Sheffield where privately owned land with no public access has been classed as open space for the purposes of the development. Furthermore, the development falls within the definition of open space for the purposes of policy LR4 and LR5 of the UDP. This is a serious oversight as it's of material nature and as such could render any approval unlawful and open to judicial review. The land in question is also identified within the draft proposal map, you can see it there, as open space. We consider this is also material because it signals the direction of travel of the City Council, and we object to developments that seek to take advantage of the delay in adopting this new development plan. I would also like to draw your attention to the claims about the biodiversity of the site or lack thereof. First, many of the reports supplied by the applicant have been conducted at desk level without a site visit and with minimal insight. All have been conducted in daylight hours without the longevity or intimate experience needed to be fully or truly accurate. In reality, for those who live close to and adjoining the site, we witness how incredibly biodiversity it is on a daily basis. Efforts from the landowner in recent years to undermine this have been noted, with the removal of over 20 mature trees just prior to the environmental survey. These were carried, it should also be noted, the same trees were marked for retention in a previous planning application, some of which were protected by a TPO, and all are clearly visible on historic Google Earth images. The scale and consequence of this action prompted an investigation of the landowner by the Forestry Commission, for which we have provided evidence. The site is heavily populated by wildlife, many of whom are nocturnal. Some abductors provided both photographic and video evidence of the activity, which includes protected species such as badgers, bats, and breeding tawny owls, kites and buzzards, as well as foxes and a wide variety of native birds. We know bats roost in the trees and many of the outbuildings within the site itself, as we see them emerge every night. We also note that the developers have not submitted a detailed bat survey and that several trees have been identified as suitable for roosting bats. In addition, the land currently provides a vital area of complete darkness and silence, which is why it's attracted such an abundance of wildlife. We feel the suggestions put forward by Sheffield Wildlife Trust to adjust the lighting plans are wholly justified and acknowledge the significant presence of protected species. As a neighbourhood group and lovers of wildlife, we've all captured badgers on camera and seen the tawny owls that also nest on site. There has been no dialogue between the developers and the Wildlife Trust or the community, and we will call into question the developers' genuine commitment to environmental protection. In reality, none of the measures proposed, such as a sedum roof or siting bird boxes, will maintain or sustain a suitable habitat for diverse wildlife, their feeding or commuting routes. The sheer mass of the building is such that the majority of the site will be decimated. As a community, we have already experienced heavy machinery on site that had to be escorted off by the RSPCA and the police. Hardly the behaviour of contractors who are sensitive to these issues or the neighbours surrounding it. Sadly, planting a few trees to replace those which will need to be removed for the build will not repair the permanent damage done to this vital, undeveloped, green, open space. This is an insensitive development that seeks to maximise profit in a neighbourhood setting. There are some big principles at stake here, and we all have the opportunity to achieve something better and more meaningful for our city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, if we could bring a Mr. Jim Lomas in, he's speaking in support of the application. Thank you, Mr. Lomas. If you'd like to unmute yourself. Sorry, tongue-tied. Lovely. Can you unmute, please?
Is that better, Chair? Can you hear me now?
It is. We can hear you now.
Right.
That's lovely.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much.
No problem at all. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Obviously, there's several points being raised there by third parties, which I will try and touch on if I can, following my short presentation. But I think to start with, I think I must highlight the fact that the applicant has positively engaged in formal pre-application dialogue with the local planning authority, with officers of the council, and which has resulted in the formation of this particular scheme. I also think you'll recognise that the scheme has been amended throughout the process, following further dialogue with officers, and also responding to feedback from third parties where appropriate. I think the design that is actually before you is something that has actually been proposed and put forward by the council's own urban design officers, and we have followed that particular advice when developing this particular scheme. I also think that the officer reports made it quite clear that the design of this particular building is deemed to be certainly in accordance with your own guidelines, and certainly complementary to the actual character of the area. There's been a lot of reference made to the building being 4 stories. I think, as Mr. Healy's quite rightly shown, the building is a combination of 3 and 4 stories, and the bulk of the building is actually set within the site, away from the public highway, set within rising land to the south. So effectively, it's using the land efficiently, but also optimising the landform in relationship to adjoining properties. In our opinion, the scheme is entirely policy compliant with both national, local and supplementary planning guides, particularly in terms of separation distances to surrounding residential properties. We've taken a lot of advice from the South Yorkshire Design Guide and certainly followed that, and that has certainly been recognised by your own officers. As mentioned, the site is located within a housing policy area, as identified in the UDP. This is the local plan which is still used for making assessments of proposals, and certainly the Class C2 residential care home is an acceptable use. Therefore, I think as some of the third parties recognise, it is a perfectly acceptable and complementary form of development taking place on the site. I think as members, you'll also be aware of the emerging issues and options plan for the city, which at this stage is obviously very much its infancy. But what this document has done is recognise the need and the shortfall for care homes and housing for elderly persons within the city. Indeed, the actual report, which was out for public consultation, specifically recognised that places such as Dore, Totley and Bradway are deficient in such accommodation, and therefore the future local plan will be looking to encourage and increase the number of these types of accommodation in this locality. As you're aware, sustainability covers a multitude of things as identified in the National Planning Policy Framework, and certainly this particular scheme will bring in approximately 130 jobs during the construction process over a 2-year period, and 33 jobs once the scheme is operational. The applicant is also willing to work with Talent Sheffield to ensure that many of these jobs are actually provided for local people. One point that has been touched on by a third party is the COVID pandemic, and certainly provision of a care home, particularly this particular scheme with wet rooms, is a great way of actually ensuring infection control can be managed. So therefore, new purpose-built facilities are better to cater for these problems that we're currently facing, and I think represents a significant material planning benefit. I think also the delivery of care homes will go a long way to ensuring that it increases the housing stock within the city. A lot of elderly residents are certainly living in accommodation which is no longer fit for purposes, and as a consequence of that, they'll be moving out of their own homes and certainly looking to live in accommodation such as this. This therefore reduces the pressure on certainly inappropriate areas to build housing, namely open spaces, recreational land, and dare I say, the green belt, in fact, which is something I'm sure we'll all be looking at next year. One point I would like to confirm is that the site is located within a sustainable location. It's close to public transport, local amenities, public open space, and it's located within the confines of an existing established community. The application is effectively using underused private land. It is not public open space. Throughout the development of this particular application and during the process, the applicant has commissioned a number of independent reports which have indicated that there will be no issues with highways, parking, traffic generation or highway safety. Further independent reports have also been undertaken which have indicated that there's no demonstrable or significant harm relating to ecology, trees, flood risk or ground stability. It must also be noted that the applicant is proposing to introduce 45 new trees, a green wall to the building, but also is prepared to look at further environmental and ecological management measures throughout the whole operation of this facility on site. Equally, I note comments made by third parties regarding the impact on immediate neighbours. Again, further reports have been undertaken, which clearly indicate that there's going to be no significant adverse impact upon the amenities of these people as a result of overlooking.
10 seconds.
Thank you. Overbearing, invasion of privacy, or loss of natural light. Independent reports have confirmed all of these matters. And equally, the separation distances I've already mentioned comply with the South Yorkshire Design Guide. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. If Mr. Lomask, Chris, if you'd like to respond to, as we have no speakers, if you'd like to respond to the comments made, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll probably wish to share the screen at times to respond to some of these.
Yeah, no worries at all.
The speakers quite helpfully split things up into kind of topic areas, so I'll go through them in order. The first speaker spoke primarily about character and impact, and I think as we said at the beginning, and I will start to share my screen if that's okay. the area, as can be seen from that image, is characterised by the speaker referred to as rural, despite its suburban presence. I mean, it certainly has a suburban character, plenty of tree cover, etc. But sorry, my screen won't move. So the building itself, yes, we acknowledge, and we acknowledge within the report, is it's different to its neighbours. It's inevitable that that's going to be the case for this particular use. It's always going to be a larger scale building, and we don't shy away from that within the report or in our consideration. What we do think is that it's set sufficiently far back from the road to not be seen as a particular prominent feature within the landscape. We recognise it will be visible, but the work that we've done with the building, with the applicant, to try and put some features of interest within it, to provide some modelling within the elevation, different materials for the upper floor, so that the flat roof reads similarly to a traditional, if you like, it's an interpretation of a kind of a slate or tile roof, if you like, on an upper floor of a building, and the roof. So we feel that we've broken down the mass of the building quite successfully. We appreciate there are concerns about an institutional appearance, and that might have been the case previously, but we think we've gone far enough to remove those. And the building does have modelling, different planes, different use materials. So to summarise on that point, yes, it is different in character, and yes, it is a large building, but we feel that it sits within the landscape, partly because of its distance from the highway, and that it's set into the topography, as can be seen probably more so from this image. And reminding members, this is what you see from Kenwell Drive, this almost single story element there. In terms of amenity impact, yes, that is has been a consideration, and as I say, we've gone into great length in the report to cover and explain the distances involved. Some of these sections, as I say, I apologise, as I said earlier, they're not particularly clear, but this is the height of the building here relative to St Quentin Mount here, so there is a considerable height difference, but I think we do have to remember that there is significant tree cover all the way around the site as well, and that's been part of our consideration there. I will, Chair, if I can, because the speaker was from number 288, 20 Lane. I think it might be useful if I share one additional cross section that isn't actually within this slideshow, but I'll do my best to do this quickly. But I do think it's worth it because it helps understand the relationship. Just bear with me, please. Can members see that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a closer appreciation of the relationship between number 288, where the second speaker was sat, with the view out across the piece of land. So this shows a balcony that is here on the rear of that property, and a terrace here on the care home, and the relative heights. So it's at a distance of 31.6 metres, as you can see there, from wall to wall. Obviously a little bit less from terrace to terrace, but they're at a similar level. And in a domestic situation, certainly that's far exceeds the guidance that we would bring to play. So that just gives members a bit of an impression of the relationship of probably with the dwelling that has the most open aspect towards the site, I would suggest. Sorry, I'm just going through quite a lot of comments. Yeah, there's that same speaker also referred to disturbance through a number of other things, not just overlooking from the windows and loss of light, etc., but general disturbance, artificial light from plants, commercial kitchens and what have you. And yes, that has resulted in a number of conditions, but we think those conditions are perfectly reasonable way of ensuring that there is no impact. The distance is considerable. From most properties, it's in the order of 30 to 40 metres. And that level of distance with the conditions, with maximum noise limits, etc., we feel adequately resolve those concerns. The speaker did say that those conditions don't take account of the cumulative impact, and I understand the point that's being made there, but each individually is capable of being made satisfactory, so there's no reason why in combination they should result in a level of harm that would result in a negative recommendation. I don't propose to go into a lot of detail in responding to comments around kind of the need and the of the development, because it's a commercial decision essentially to apply for planning permission and to develop the site out for care home purposes. It's clear that there is an ageing population and there will be a need to deal with that as an issue, and that's going to increase over time. Quite how that's provided for isn't really the role of the committee, I don't feel, in determining this particular application. This application isn't going to change one way or another the way that we care for people long term in the future. I think we just have to deal with it as it's proposed, Chair, and not consider that this might not be the right form of development for long term care. Councillor Smith commented more generally on the overall impact, I think, of the height, scale, massing and overbearing impact, particularly on number 288 Twentwell Lane, which is why I showed the slide I last did. And again, it's accepted that a building of that scale will have an impact on immediate neighbours, in particular 288, but we have considered it carefully, Chair, and we do think that for the reasons explained, that impact is not at a level that we could consider harmful to a degree that would warrant a refusal of permission. And finally, on the points raised by the final speaker, the first thing I just wanted to correct is the reference to open space, Chair, because it is in UDP, it's in the housing area. It's coloured brown on the map, if you like. It's housing land where a C2 use is acceptable. It's not accessible to the public, so it doesn't fit the definition that's set out in either the MPPF or in policy CS 47 of the core strategy. There have been some references to LR4 and LR8, which are policies within the UDP that seek to protect open space. However, they're both inappropriate and should be ignored because policy CS 47 replaced those two policies. So in sequence, LR4 and LR8 were part of the UDP from 1998. The core strategy came along in 2009 and specifically identified within Appendix 3 the policies that were superseded, and they include LR4 and LR8, so they're not relevant there and shouldn't be considered. Equally, policy LR5 isn't appropriate as that's only applicable to sites that are within an identified open space area, and as a reminder, this is a housing area. So just to clear up and avoid any confusion on that, Chair. In terms of the draft proposals map identifying it as public open space, that was from 2013 and a proposal, a document that hasn't progressed and is not part of a current consultation, so that has no weight either. Protected species and ecological impacts have formed a large part of our assessment, and there have been numerous surveys undertaken top-up surveys. I'm sorry, Chair. Can you hear me okay? I think there's some
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, sorry, Chair.
There have been top-up surveys done because of the date of some of the surveys, and recent visits and site meetings involving ecologists from both the council, from the applicant's team, and from independent advisors, local specialists in particular fields. And the conclusion there is that there are no protected habitats on the site, and those that are nearby, i.e. in adjoining gardens or on neighbouring land, couldn't stand in the way of the development. And there is a condition, in particular number 17, which talks about the need for a construction management plan to deal with wildlife impacts. So through that process, any licenses that might come forward during the construction process would need to be followed through. So in short, on protected species, Chair, it's been adequately, thoroughly assessed and considered, and there are no protected species on the site that would stand in the way of the development. I think that's, there was just there was a point around highways impact and impact on 20 Well Lane, and I wonder if Helen is best placed to respond to that.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think that there was a comment made about, I think it was in particular in relation to parking and the perceived lack of parking on the site. It is something that we've been very cautious about, because obviously we appreciate that on-street parking on that section of 20 Well Lane would be inappropriate. So what we have done, we've referred to our own guidelines, which actually require less parking than is being provided on site, and we've also looked at other sites run by this developer, and also all the selection of sites used by the TRICS development, the TRICS database. And what we've found is that the ratio of parking on this site is actually at the upper end of all the sites that we've looked at. So we do believe that the parking will be able to accommodate the likely demand, and the level of parking is also appropriate for the level of trips we're estimating the development to generate. Just to clarify that the access is completely acceptable from a highways perspective. It meets all the requirements in terms of sight lines. That's for people exiting the development. The forward visibility, so that's the visibility as people are travelling along 20 Well Lane is met. And as I said, the service vehicles can turn on site. That's been demonstrated by the applicant through the use of tracking. So from a highways perspective, we do feel that the proposal is completely acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Okay, I'm going to open this up to questions now. Could you indicate if you have a question? Councillor Davidson, just before I go, I just want to make sure I've got everybody down. Councillor Sangar and Councillor McCann. Councillor Chaplin, Councillor Weatherall. Have I missed anybody off? No, that's fine. Okay, we'll start with Councillor Davidson. If you could.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Your question.
Thank you. I've got two questions relating to 13 and 17 of the conditions. On 13, there's no mention of the fact that there's a well there at the bottom of the site. Now, what would happen to that? Is there a water table there, and how would they cap it off, and how would they prevent any pollution, seeping through to further down the hill? That's one. And the second question relates to 17. Now, it is about biodiversity, and I've just lost the thing, but I'll remember it now. It's just got off my screen. It doesn't say how the biodiversity is being looked after. I mean, one of the things that did worry me was that the fact that the badger run was going to be built over. Now, badgers have you know, a straight run. That they're very consistent in where they travel, and I thought some kind of building, if it had been a different kind of building, it you know, there's some like the gardens at the bottom, that could have been catered for. But with this home, it doesn't seem to have been catered for. Is there any way in which we can look at that? Thank you. Or relook at it. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair.
Chris?
Struggling to unmute there. So in terms of the first point around condition 13, condition 13, just in case members haven't got it in front of them, is a condition that requires detailed proposals for surface water disposal, including calculations, and that's all about minimising surface water runoff and from the site, taking account of climate change, etc. So the well is a feature at the bottom end of the site. It's of no particular merit on its own. I don't know, Chair, how that specifically relates to the water table, but that condition will deal with all surface water disposal and water issues on the site. In terms of pollution, that would the conditions around contamination are there to deal with pollution in all ways, or through all kind of forms of passage. So I'd be happy that the condition on the various conditions around land contamination will deal with that, as will the surface water disposal details that need to be submitted. In terms of condition 17, I think the question, I think, Chair, was that, you know, that doesn't say how the biodiversity will be looked after specifically, and specifically with reference to the any badger activity on the site. The advice that we've had from the ecologists is that the sets themselves are not within the site, so there are a small number of sets in the surrounding area, and that this site is used along with several others for commuting, for foraging, and the conclusions of the ecologists there is that despite the presence of a building on the site, that doesn't remove their habitat significantly. In other words, there's plenty of other land available for them to forage. So I don't think I can say any more than that, Chair. That's the advice of the ecologist was taken into account and questioned and updated around the question of badgers, and there's no indication that what's being proposed would be harmful to them.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
Right, thank you. I will have another question afterwards if somebody hasn't answered it, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
That's very kind of you. Thank you. Councillor Sangar, your question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I clearly want to pursue the ecology point of view, because usually when we go on these site visits, it's a bit of scrub grassland, and clearly this was, you know, open woodland which has been taken over by wildlife. So Councillor Davidson has talked about badgers, so I wanted to pursue that in terms of what is the range of badgers. I mean, I would guess, given the tracks we saw right across the site, they were, you know, they were going from St Quentin right over to 20well Lane and then over to the woods on the other side of 20well Lane. So my understanding is that badgers have a reasonable range, and that by building, was it correct that if we built such a large block of buildings that we were curtailing the badgers range? So that's the first question. The second question in terms of I thought the report was quite thin in terms of birds, because when we went there was a lot of birds nesting in the trees. Now clearly this is not the nesting season, but one of the residents talked about tawny owls. Do we need to protect are tawny owls in any way protected? That's question 2, and question 3, going back to the whole issue of how close it is to 288 20 Lane, which is a passive house. Chris Healy's just showed us that slide about distance, but is there a similar slide that talks about how much of the solar gain of the house will be lost if this application went through? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know, Chair. I don't know the range of a badger, Chair, but yes, I mean, I am repeating my early answer. I think really that the ecologist surveys identified that the site was used for foraging, and commuting, but that the position of the sets was such that their activity, their habitat wasn't being damaged in such a way that would necessitate either redesign of the development or rejection. If it had have done, then based on the ecologist's advice, we might have been looking at a different recommendation, Chair. But it doesn't. And the proximity of the sets in the northwestern corner is where it was of greatest concern. But the advice there is that construction activity is capable of being able to take place there without harm to the species. So on that basis, Chair, we've recommended the condition which requires a detailed management plan to be brought to bear that requires them to set out exactly how they're going to manage that to avoid harm. In terms of birds, then again the ecologist work that was undertaken looked at all protected species potential on the site and didn't identify any for birds. And again, the condition 17 will require things to be done in the right order in terms of timing. So there are certain times of year when you can't, for instance, remove vegetation for fear of damaging nesting birds. In terms of protected, tawny owls protected, there were no protected species identified within the survey information, Chair. In terms of proximity to 288, and well, sorry, not so much the proximity. This was a question around light impact. There was a sunlight and daylight analysis undertaken, and number 288 and number 15 St Quentin Mount were the two properties that were identified as being impacted. The survey or the analysis identified in terms of number 288 one window beneath the balcony that might be adversely affected. And in terms of number 15 St Quentin Mount, there are about 5 windows, all of which were secondary windows facing quite close to the site boundary and would gain sufficient light from elsewhere. And that was also the view taken for number 288. So yeah, and it's at that distance of over, I can't remember exactly what it was from the information, I haven't got information in front of me right now, but 30 odd meters. So yes, when the sun's lower, there will be some reduction in sunlight increase in shadow on both properties that face the site. But again, not to a degree that we felt was sufficiently harmful to warrant rejecting the application on those grounds or requiring remodelling of the building.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Can I just follow up that final answer? I mean, the question was not just about light. It's just that my understanding of a passive house is it gains its heating from solar energy, from sunlight. And if you take the light away, you take the heat away. Has that been analysed in this report? Because I still haven't seen that in this report, and I didn't hear that in the answer.
No, it hasn't. Not specifically. No, it hasn't, Chair. I don't think you could have a situation where we could resist a development because of impact on energy needs of one house. I think it's not proportionate, really. I accept that it might have some impact on that, but I don't think that it of itself could be a reason to withhold permission on a neighbouring scheme.
Okay, thanks, Chair. I'll have comments later.
Thank you. Thank you. I have Councillor McCann next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on the planning history, it said 1992 there was permission for landfill. And then further on in the report, there's a mention about asbestos. Is there any record of what sort of soil or whatever other materials were actually tipped on this site? And have there been any survey done as to whether they are contaminating the site and potentially contaminating further occupancy?
Chair, there was a phase 1 report undertaken. I'm trying to scroll through the report now just to quickly come to that. But essentially that concluded that some further testing was needed as part of more investigative work to be taken on site, to be undertaken on site. I don't know the answer to the question about what the material is, Chair. So bottom of page 91 and top of page 92 confirms that the Council's environmental protection officers have looked at the information submitted, and it didn't fully characterise the site. So further information is needed. So some further intrusive investigation works are required, along with the remediation strategy that's yet to be submitted and is required by one of the conditions in the permission, in order that satisfactorily deals with all contamination issues. There wasn't, however, if there had been a significant level of concern about the nature of the material within there and the ability to safely deal with it, then we wouldn't have progressed to a situation where we're recommending it for approval with conditions, Chair. We've satisfied ourselves, and the environmental protection will have advised us that we're okay to proceed to that position. So I can't answer the question about the material, but I'm satisfied that it's adequately covered with the conditions.
Bob?
Chair, yeah, I'm really not very happy with that because, I mean, obviously the recording of landfill sites now is much more robust than it was back in the day. So I do have real concerns about what might be underneath that when they start disturbing this for digging out foundations. So I really do think that this should have been sorted out before this application came before the committee, Chair. And
right, okay, let me stop you there. Chris, can you just explain that while does anybody else want to come in?
Well, when a site comes forward and a developer submits a phase 1 assessment, that's there to identify and characterise the likely level of risk within a site and then development of a site. If that throws up all sorts of particularly serious concerns that and so I would expect that the information submitted, I haven't got it to hand, Chair, but I would expect that the information submitted identified it will have identified, because it's so recent, the previous activity on the site. And at that point, the officers from environmental protection will look at that and feel that if there is something that is particularly alarming, they would require further satisfaction before recommending to us as planning officers that, that the scheme can proceed with appropriate conditions. They haven't done that. What they've done is they've identified a couple of areas that will need further work, but I've recommended conditions to ensure that that's done safely. And that's a very standard approach, Chair.
Right, okay.
So in a nutshell, our environment protection team advises that the site is safe for development with these appropriate safeguards.
And they will have the powers to check as it goes along if anything did come to light.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, okay, which I think is what Councillor McCann was, yeah. So there's checks and balances within the within that. Okay, lovely. Councillor McCann, anything else?
No, I'll come back with a comment, Chair.
Okay, I'll pop you down for a comment then. Councillor Chaplin.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that there's been a lot of work put in to cover off a lot of things to get this building to this point in the application. And it has met with a lot of objections, particularly from people living in the locality. I've got three questions. The first is over loss of amenity. Can we be confident that if we were to approve this scheme, that none of the neighbours could bring a claim against the council for having failed to take the loss of amenity into consideration? The second one is on the vehicles that could, at the moment, would be allowed to deliver between 7 AM and 11 PM. That does seem to be quite a wide time span for that part of Sheffield. Could that be secured by condition to reduce it, say, to a 12-hour period, 9 AM to 9 PM or something similar? And the third question is whether the scheme has the applicant has considered putting in electrical charging points for vehicles where the car parking spaces are. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, Chris and Helen could answer those, couldn't you? Do you want to go first, Chris, and then let Helen come in?
Yes, they might all be mine, actually, Chair, but
okay, that's fine.
I'll happily let Helen join in if she wishes to. So in terms of loss of amenity, could anyone bring a claim that they haven't considered? I think we've considered it extremely carefully, Chair, and evidenced by about 3 pages worth of description of position of neighbouring properties. So I think we've definitely taken into account and considered carefully the impact on the neighbours. And in fact, some adjustments have been made to the scheme as a result of that, particularly in the northwestern, northern part of the site. The delivery hours, 7 till 11. Again, it's a standard condition, and you know, I'm not saying we're just slavishly applying standard conditions, but they reflect what is acknowledged as the nighttime period. So the nighttime period is generally acknowledged and was within previous national planning guidance set out to be between 11 o'clock at night and 7 in the morning. So the vast majority of our conditions that relate to avoidance of disturbance for things such as that would follow that 7 till 11 period. And that kind of delivery restriction is a standard condition that's applied to schemes of a similar ilk or schemes that involve deliveries near to residential property. So I think it would be inconsistent if we applied reduced times, although there's always the scope for when each site is considered on its individual merits for a tighter restriction to be applied if that's felt to be justified. As officers, we didn't feel it was in this particular case. Electric charging points. I must admit, Chair, I need to review the conditions to check that. I think the answer is no, but I could do with very quickly reviewing the conditions to answer that properly. But there are about 40 of them. If just give me one moment, please.
No worries at all.
I think no, they're not specifically referred to. There is a condition number 26 which deals with BREEAM requirements to achieve BREEAM very good, and that is there to ensure sustainable building construction and operation. I believe that could incorporate features such as electric vehicle charging as part of its criteria. But if that was something that members felt was needed specifically, there is the potential for that to be added as a condition, if that was felt to be appropriate.
I think on that last point, given the signals that have been coming out of from central government, it would be wise to put that in as a condition, because I think a lot of people have to be moving over to electric vehicles in the coming years.
Well, I presume that's not really I presume that's something that could be put in later on, and no doubt it's what lots of people will do, hopefully, if it's a so yeah, but that's up to you as a committee anyway, but I can't, yeah. Any more questions, Councillor Chaplin? Okay. Helen, have you anything to add at all, or are you quite?
No, I think
that's fine. Just want to make sure. Sorry. Yeah. Lovely. The final speaker I have at the moment is Councillor Weatherall. Gary.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Well, I'll second what Mike's proposed there, Chair, later on. I've got some comments, Chair, but Chris and Helen's actually answered the questions I got, so thank you, Chair.
No, you're welcome. I can appreciate your brevity. Do we have any more questions for any more members before we move to comments? No, I'm just making sure. I've got a lot of glare, so yeah.
Roger, Chair.
So, pardon?
Councillor Davidson.
Yeah, it's okay. That's what I was about to say. You're all clear. Yeah, Councillor Davidson. Another
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I was going to say I've got Roger down here. If his question hasn't been asked, that's what he said.
Right. It was merely it's a one for Helen, really. If there were to be cars parked outside the site in the immediate vicinity, that would make it very dangerous because of the brow of the hill. At the moment, it's quite easy to see. You've got a fairly clear vision going right and left. As long as there's not too many cars, you're all right. But if there were to be cars parked in the vicinity, that would mask the viewpoint. So I wonder, would there be any consideration, should this be passed, of putting yellow lines down there to prevent any masking? Thank you.
Helen.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I think I've got to start by saying that we do feel that the car parking provision that is being indicated will accommodate the level of demand. However, I do appreciate exactly what you're saying, that if cars did park there, then obviously there is an issue. But my view is that should be monitored through the travel plan, because I think it would be difficult to justify imposing a condition requiring that we look at provision of waiting restrictions when we actually feel that the evidence that we've got quite strongly indicates that the parking accommodation on site will accommodate the demand. But it is something that we can monitor through the travel plan.
Okay, Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome, Roger. Yeah, I am being looked after today. I feel very cared for. Right, okay. So, Councillor Weatherall, you've got another question?
No, Chair, it's just a comfort break. I thought we were going to have one about 4 o'clock.
Yeah, but we go to the vote first. We haven't got that far yet. And then I am going to do that. I've got comments at the moment. I've got Councillor McCann and Councillor Weatherall that wish to make a comment. I've got Councillor Sangar now. Anybody else wish to make a comment? I can see Councillor Garber. You are all very dark on my screen, do you know, which is making it quite, I think it's because the light's going into dusk. There's only me and Chris really brightly lit at the moment. So
Councillor Price has got his hand up, Chair.
I can see Councillor Price has got it there. So I've got Councillor McCann, Councillor Weatherall, Councillor Sanger, Councillor Garber and Councillor Price. Is that it? Okay. Go ahead, Councillor McCann. Your comment first, please.
Thank you, Chair. I shan't be supporting this application, Chair. I think it's very inappropriate. I think it's, well, it'd be a blot on the landscape, but quite frankly, I think it's totally out of character with the area. And speaking as someone who may well be needing a facility like that in a not too distant future, I really don't think that's somewhere I would want to live. Where trying to climb up the 20-well lane, it would be nigh impossible in certain circumstances, which would require a mobility scooter, and the footpaths around here aren't exactly big to put a mobility scooter on. So I think it's totally inappropriate, this scheme, Chair, and I won't be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Weatherall.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think Chris and Helen and the teams really put this together. This is a long period of time this report's been put together. It's answered a lot of questions for me about this site. I did see it the other day. It's needed and it's in a good location, and I think it's going to go out really well, Chair, and I shall be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Sangar. Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I can't support the officer's recommendation on this one. I think it's the wrong building in the wrong location. There's no other 4-storey buildings in the site. It's overbearing for the particular site. I agree with Councillor McCann in terms of access for frail elderly people, whether they're walking with a stick up to the shops or whether they're trying to use a mobility scooter. I'm not convinced that's been thought through. I don't think the current owner of the land has looked after the ecology of the site, but I don't feel that's necessarily a strong enough planning reason.
Just 1 second.
I don't think it's, sorry, given the nature, given that it's already designated as housing, you know, I do think we will look at a future. We can look at a future application for other housing site, but I don't think 4 stories in such a massive block is appropriate for the site, and I shall be voting against.
Thank you. Victoria, you were indicating you wish to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I know that we've got a couple of councillors now. In terms of suggesting that you're going to be refusing this application, if members could advise us of the planning reasons why they're thinking of voting that way, that'd be really helpful. And if you could perhaps give the planning officer a chance to respond to those reasons, that would be really useful before we move to the vote. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll just finish with the comments first, but thank you. I thank you for your support on that. I appreciate it. Okay, thank you, Councillor Sangar. Councillor Garbett.
Thank you, Chair. I'm of the like mind as Councillor Sangar and McCann. I think it's too big, it's the wrong place, it's the wrong time. I think, you know, if we've got a consultation that's not coming in until the 29th of November, which means the results won't be out until next year, I think trying to get this through until we know what those results are would be, you know, it would be beneficial if we had this come through after those results had come through. Someone, I think it was Mr. Lomas, said it's underused private land. Well, private land, even if it's not used by people walking on it or playing on it or whatever, still has uses. And I think some of the uses that a lot of the residents who've been speaking today have been pointing at the open space that they can see, the sunlight that comes through, the fact that there's wildlife around. These are all uses of land, and I think that yeah, we do need to build things, but you know that they're uses that don't get taken into account quite often.
Thank you.
There's quite a few other things. I'm worried about the fact that this is a commercial decision, but it does impact on the community. It's something that if it fails, and who knows, because of, you know, a lot of things are changing now because of the COVID outbreak, etc. If it fails, they've got a four-story building on their hands, and who knows what will happen. It might have a different
Councillor
use.
Garber, it's for comments. I mean, a lot of these seem like questions, and we've gone past
No,
questions.
they're not questions, they're comments. These are why I'm going to be, and we were asked to give reasons. These are reasons why I feel that this is a really important thing to be saying. I think, you know, if this fails, and who knows if it's going to succeed or not, then it will have an important effect on the community around it.
Yeah, we haven't decided, we haven't took a vote on this yet about that. So I'm asking for comments. We're getting a feel of the committee. I still have other people to make the comments. So if we come into a point where we need to look for that, we will then go into that detail. So if you could just concisely put your comments together, and then we'll look at that further on. Thank you.
I've finished.
Finished. Thank you very much. Okay. Councillor Price, your comments, please.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit I found this very difficult. There is certainly a demand for elderly apartments and care homes, and an increasing demand, there's no question about that. And at that side of the city where it's pleasant and good views, etc. 80 beds sounds large to me. To have to cater for. Having said that, I think it's a very big site. The topography lends itself, with it dropping out the valley, to that sort of size, and of course it is land that's been identified for housing. So if it's not this, then there will be houses on the site, I guess, in future. On balance, I'm going to support the officer recommendation, Chair, but I do think it's a bit large. But that's a social services issue, really, about cater for that number of elderly people in one block. But in planning grounds, I can't see any real reason for turning it down on planning grounds, Chair. So I'm going to support the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson, a comment, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've had a similar difficulty with this particular one, and I was leaning to vote for it, but there are one or two things that I'm not happy about, and the overbearing question is one of them. It's a site that can be developed, but we have to live in harmony with nature, and that is a really important question, which I don't think was adequately dealt with in the report. And I think that if it were to come back as housing, it could be coped with much better. So I am going to, on balance, vote against it.
Thank you, Roger. Okay. Councillor Law.
Thanks, Chair. That will be brief. I mean, I can see no real reason for refusing this, and it's right. And I'm certainly supportive of it. I think we've got to have genuine planning reasons for refusing it, and I can't. I'm struggling to find any.
Okay. So, anybody else? Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. If it had been 2 stories, I'd have voted for this, but I'm not going to do because it's 4. It's going to cause overshadowing. It's going to cause loss of amenity and loss of privacy. I was particularly impressed with Jo Mallins, who she's had a house built, an eco house basically, and this is going to have a dramatic effect on that house and the property. I feel sorry for that lady. That's
okay.
all I want to say, and
I
will be voting against this.
Thank you. Okay, so anybody else wish to speak? Now I'm going to go to Victoria. Thank you, Victoria. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I know a lot of the councillors have mentioned their reasons. I just think it would be useful now if you could invite Chris to come in now and describe which of those reasons he believes are material considerations and which aren't. There's certainly a few there that I could deal with, but I think if Chris wants to go first, and then I can come in.
I appreciate that, yeah, because it's been quite bad, you know, 50-50. So, Chris, could you address the comments made?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So of the members that have indicated that they would not support the scheme, the theme of the comments would seem to be around, first of all, the scale of the building. And there's almost two sides to that. One being that it's out of character with the locality, so that's a visual amenity consideration. But then the second side of that being the impact that has on the neighbouring occupiers, and one or two in particular have referred to, sorry, at least one member has referred to the impact on number 288, 20 Lane, which was, to remind members, is the property with the balcony that faces the site. The similar comments that I'd noted were that the building was is the wrong building in the wrong location, that it's too big, and that that has an impact on residents' amenity in terms of overshadowing, overbearing presence to them. The one area that I think, you know, we would really struggle to and that overbearing impact on neighbours' amenity, visual amenity, obviously they are relevant planning considerations. In terms of the future possibilities of what happens to elderly care and potential for the building failing in the long term, the project failing in the long term, I don't feel, Chair, that that's something that we could consider as a material consideration.
No.
Without clear policy guidance along those lines. So I think really we're down to scale of development and those two impacts.
Yeah. Okay, so you've heard those reasons why, but before we can, we don't know whether the application is going to be refused. So we need to go to the vote first on the recommendation. Is that correct, Victoria? And then we can see what the outcome of that is. Okay. Okay, so we'll go to the vote. The officer's recommendation is to grant contumely. So make sure I've got the right piece of paper here. I've got them all over the place. Is to grant conditionally, and we'll go through. Councillor Sangar.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Dams.
For, Chair.
Councillor Garbett.
Against, Chair.
Councillor McCann.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Naz.
For, Chair.
Councillor Rosalind Josephs.
For, Chair.
Councillor Gary Weatherall.
For, Chair.
Councillor Alan Law.
For, Chair.
Councillor Peter Price.
For, Chair.
Councillor Clarkson.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Roger Davidson.
Against, Chair, sorry.
Councillor Chaplin.
For.
Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'll make that 7 for and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against. Is that correct, Abby? Okay.
Yes, Chair, that's what I've got.
That application has been granted. Okay. Thank you for the debate. Okay. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 7C.
Comfort rate.
Oh yeah, so sorry. No, you absolutely. Do you know what? If we can all put some light on, because Most of you are so dark to me. Yes, we'll have a 10-minute comfort break. Yeah, you can all put your lights on. Yeah. Is everybody dark to you?
Jane, your mic's on. Jane, your mic's on.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm only singing to myself.
Sorry, Chair. Just to let you know, I understand that normally if we have a comfort break, somebody does turn off the stream, and I can just see that in the top left-hand corner of my screen, the stream is still on.
Okay.
I don't know if that's something that Jay could deal with, or whether it's something you don't feel is necessary. That's all.
As long as we're all behaving ourselves. I thought you've heard me singing to myself. I apologise to the public, and I won't be asked to go on the
Actually, I'm not sure that we can
X-Factor.
turn the stream off the way that we broadcast the meetings. Jay, can you confirm?
Yeah, so the new system we have, I can't stop it, otherwise it'll do the whole thing.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, we've all put the lights on now, so I can see.
I've got a lamp specially.
It's really difficult though, because as the light goes dusk, you know, people become so. I'm like that, making sure I'm not missing any of you. but Alan's well lit up.
But Chair, your background is very bright, so it might just be.
It's not actually. It's very subtle. But I put a light in front of my laptop, do you know, to do that. It is difficult though. One of the challenges of this is, you know, I've noticed that when it was early on, when we had bright light nights, never a problem. But as we're going into this twilight time, it is, and as meetings go from bright light into this. Yeah. But we live and learn.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Shouldn't be much longer, should we? So everyone can come back. Yeah. I'm sure the public are pleased to have a comfort break as well.
I bet you are.
Okay. Here he is, Tony. So just wait for everyone to come back. Just a minute, can't read that. Thank you.
What are you doing, cooking a bloody meal?
Oh, I'm getting another career going. He's enjoyed my singing. It's a good job I had my camera off because I was a bit... You've made me smile anyway, thank you. Just waiting. Okay, I think the 10 minutes is nearly up now. We need the bell, don't we, for the council? That's what we need. It's a nice big mug, Councillor Weatherall.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I've put an extra couple of lights on. Is that all right for you?
I can see you beautiful now. It's, but you know, it is really difficult though. Yeah, we were just saying it's one of the yeah. Just Councillor Naz and Councillor Rosalind Josephs, and then we're ready. Councillor Chaplin's got a lovely white shirt on, so he's showing up beautifully. Look, very smart, Councillor Chaplin. There we go.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn.
Welcome. Well, you know, you are my colleague. Right then, so we're all back. Welcome. Okay. And I apologise again for my singing, but I seem to have got a bit of an audience, so we never know. Right, we'll move on to the next part of the agenda. Item 7C, which is application number 19/0459/REM, formerly PP 083199975. Approval of reserved matters. The proposal is the erection of 14 dwellings with associated parking, landscaping works and formation of access road. Application to approve layout, scale, appearance and landscaping as reserved under planning permission number 17/01543/OUT amended plans. The location is Pothouse Lane, S36, and the officer presenting is Dinah. So Dinah, I hope if you'd like to go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. As you described, this is a reserved matters application for 14 houses on a site which was granted outline planning permission in 2017. The vehicular access point into the site was approved as part of the outline consent, so this application is seeking approval of the outstanding reserve matters, which are layout, scale, appearance and landscaping. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so the application site is located at the junction of Pothouse Lane here and Linden Crescent. The site comprises at the moment of a single dwelling house and grassland which slopes down from south to north. There are residential properties to the north and to the south. There's a bowling green and tennis courts to the east, and there is a care home and a nursery and infant school to the west. This slide shows the existing dwelling house. This is standing on Pothouse Lane looking east at the existing dwelling house at the corner, on the corner of the site. This one shows a view down Pothouse Lane with the existing house just at the right of the screen here. The two photographs at the bottom of the slide show sections of the existing stone boundary wall to Pothouse Lane, which is to be retained. And it shows the 3 field maples along the site frontage, 2 of which are to be removed. There are further views across the site showing the rear of houses to the south. These houses front Linden Crescent, and this is a view across the site from the east, and it's showing some of the mature trees in the beyond the northeast corner of the site. These trees aren't in the application site. The proposed site layout shows the new access, access road. Excuse me. The new access road taken from Linden Crescent. It shows the retained tree on Pothouse to Pothouse Lane and opportunities for new tree planting. It shows 4 houses fronting Pothouse Lane, but they take their vehicular access from the internal access road and not from the highway. And it shows 2 houses fronting Linden Crescent with driveway access from the highway, and 8 houses running east to west. Each house has at least 2 off-street parking spaces, and there are 4 visitor parking spaces on the access road here. In this axonometric view of the site, you can see how the proposal reinforces the street frontages here and here, and how the density of the development is in keeping with the character of the area. The proposals comprise of 3 and 4 bedroom, 2-storey dwellings, and this is an example of a 3-bedroom unit, and this is a slightly larger 4-bedroom unit. Each house is now to be finished in brick rather than render as originally proposed. In this slide, you can see the proposed south facing elevation at the top of the screen, fronting onto Linden Crescent. These are existing houses, and these are the 2 new houses fronting Linden Crescent. You can see the north facing elevation, but that won't be visible from the street scene. And then at the bottom of the screen, you can see the elevation facing onto Pothouse Lane, the 4 houses here. This section shows the fallen land across the site. You can see Linden Crescent at the right-hand side of your screen. This is the internal access road, and the land falls to the north, and these are existing properties to the north of the site. A minimum of 21 metres separates the proposed dwelling houses from neighbours to the north, and rear gardens along the boundary are at least 10 metres deep, in accordance with our supplementary planning guidance. I'm going to stop sharing now. Finally, I'd just like to draw your attention to item 2 on the supplementary report. That simply updates the list of plans in condition 2 to incorporate some additional information, which is spot levels on the site plan, on a new site plan, and make some minor corrections. The proposals haven't been altered in any way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And we have no speakers on this application, so it's straight over to the committee for any questions. I can see Councillor Sangar's indicated. Okay, and Councillor Chaplin. Just a minute, I'm just getting my little list first. Right, anybody else? Councillor Price. Is that it for the moment? Okay, okay. Councillor Sangar, your question.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I did find the site visit very useful in terms of understanding the site and the topography. Can I just ask about these carports? I mean, we don't normally have carports, and I'm not convinced by the design of them. So, what's the position that we're actually that's being proposed in terms of the carports?
Thank you, Diana.
Yes, thank you, Chair. But there is a condition on the recommendation requiring full details to be submitted in relation to the carports, because although we agree, or we believe that carports are a good idea because they then are not converted into living accommodation, and they allow views through between the properties, we're not convinced by the design of them. So there is a condition just requiring an extra level of detail to be submitted and agreed.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, thank you. Councillor Chaplin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I've got 3 questions, but just to follow up on the carports, I thought that read a bit strange to me in the report, perhaps because I don't use my garage as a garage like so many other house dwellers. What's to stop people, assuming this goes ahead, what's to stop people putting in planning applications to convert their carports to garages? I will come up. Sorry, do you want the other questions, or do you want to take that one first?
Please give the 3, and then she can answer them all at once.
Page 110 talks about the population density ranges in the area, and says, and it seems to suggest that it's on the medium side and then on the low side, and it just seems to go a long way about trying to reconcile those 2 positions in the report. It's a bit like we were trying to have our cake and eat it, and I'm not sure what bearing it actually has on the application at all, really. On bottom of page 113 refers to the trees that are there. Do any of them have tree preservation orders on them? And lastly, on going to the conclusion on page 116, there quite a lot of the CS policies are referenced, but I don't see any referencing renewable energy or anything in relation to installing electrical charging points for the motor vehicles, whether that would be put in the carports or the garages. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dinah.
Okay, Chair, thank you. I'll try and cover all those. There is nothing to stop someone putting in a planning application subsequently to build a garage, but it does allow us to consider then the impact on, for example, parking in the area. So it just gives us an extra degree of control in the future. Density, I think the report states that the recommended density in the area is between 30 and 50, and this development comes out slightly below that, but we consider it to be very much in keeping with the character of the area. But we're required to give that explanation as part of our assessment of 14 houses on the site. Trees, there are no TPOs on the site. There was a tree survey submitted with the application. It's largely grassland. Most of the trees are sort of around the periphery. And there's only a small number of what are considered to be category B trees. And 3 of them are those ones on the site frontage that are pointed out on that photograph. So, and one of those will be retained, and the other 2 will be replaced as part of a landscape scheme. But there are no protected trees on the site. And then in terms of the conclusion, the outline application dealt with matters such as sustainability. This, we're only dealing with, as I said at the beginning, with layout, appearance, landscape, and I've forgotten the other one for a moment.
Scale, appearance, landscaping.
Yeah, landscaping, appearance, layout, and scale.
Scale.
So and the outline permission and the conditions attached to that deal with the matters such as of sustainability.
So really I should be asking that at a later stage, assuming this application
well, no,
progresses.
It's dealt with on the outline planning permission.
Yes.
So this is one that's been through outlining and then has come back here. Victoria, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I think the planning officer may have been trying to recall that it's also the access to this site that is forming part of this reserve matters.
No, that's already been approved.
Oh, sorry, the formation of the access road.
Yes, that was approved as part of the outline. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, are you quite happy, Councillor Chaplin? Yeah, I think this is the first reserve matters we've had come back after a lot of outlying recently. So it's really interesting, isn't it, to see it go through the stages. Right, and I've got Councillor Price for a question.
Thank you. Could Helen just briefly go through the traffic issues? Because 1 or 2 of the objectives, as I identify, the problems of parking on the streets, etc., and the increased traffic. The only thing I can see is any legitimate grounds for not proceeding with it. So Helen, just outline the assessment of the officers, please.
Absolutely, thank you. Helen.
Chair. Yes, I mean, in terms of the additional traffic generated by, you know, the 14 houses, we really don't feel that that is going to have any significant impact in terms of congestion or highway safety. That's not to say that obviously, you know, there isn't going to be that extra bit of traffic. I think the big thing is that we are very comfortable that, again, that the parking, that the development is going to be able to accommodate its own parking, if you like, and that we're not going to create additional parking plus additional parking demand on street plus additional traffic. So I think really the balance is that because we've got a good level of parking on site, I mean, it's one of the few sites, in all honesty, where we've actually got some visitor parking, which is always a benefit. So I think that's why we are comfortable, even sort of given the you know, current situation in terms of parking around there.
Councillor Price, anything?
No, thank you. That's excellent.
Lovely. Okay. Anybody else got any more questions? Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask?
You're frozen, Jack.
As you look at the map, you'll see it's called Pothouse. That area, is there any significant history or heritage that might be that the council have looked into with regards to that area? Do we know?
Not in relation to this development, no.
No, because I believe that the house on that land is Pothouse. Do you think before we go ahead, and the area is a name for a specific reason, do you think there ought to have been some work done on that, the history of that land? It may be we're doing away with something, but
well,
we're here.
I think so. Can I answer?
Yeah, of course you can, Diana. Yeah.
Sorry, I kept losing you. I think there's 2 things. One is we've already dealt with the principle of redeveloping the site with the outline permission. So I think and some of those fundamental issues, or all the fundamental issues, I guess, in terms of using the site for something else, were addressed then. In terms of assessment of history, we're required, as part of the planning process, to consider heritage assets. So if there was a listed building or a conservation area, or even an area of special character, or even a building identified locally as having some interest, we may consider that as part of the assessment process. But in this case, the existing building, although it may be of some age, it has been altered quite significantly, and it's not either a designated or undesignated heritage asset. So we haven't done that as part of our assessment of the current proposals. No.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. No problem at all. Any more questions from anyone? No. Okay. Any comments? I can see Councillor Price and Councillor Sangar. Okay, Councillor Price was first in my eye.
Just to say, Chair, I think it's a nice little development and I have no problems in supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Sangar.
Yeah, I shall be supporting this one. I'm very glad that we managed to retain some of the walls, and I think the committee did a good job in terms of getting the access off Posh House Lane last time. I know the 5-year housing supply is in quite a different state thanks to the good work of this committee over the last couple of years, but I still think this is an appropriate site for development, and I think it's good the developers have not been too ambitious and have gone with the character of the area and kept to two stories, and I think so. I will be supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any more comments? Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be supporting it. I know this area. It's a large swathe of grassland. Yeah, it's not well kept, but it's a large swathe and it's used as a soakaway. And you will be surprised what this development, the runoff from it, will cause a lot of flooding. That's all I've got to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, any more comments before we go to the vote? No more comments, just making sure. Lovely. Okay, so we're going to go to the vote. The officer recommendation is to grant conditionally. Okay, Councillor Sangar.
For.
You've all moved on my screen now. Councillor Dams.
For.
Councillor Garbett.
For.
Councillor McCann.
For.
Councillor Naz. Councillor Rosalind Josephs.
For.
Councillor Weatherall.
For.
Councillor Law.
For.
Councillor Price.
For.
Councillor Clarkson.
Against, Chair.
Councillor Davidson.
For, Chair.
And Councillor Chaplin.
For, Chair.
Okay, I make that 11 supporting the recommendation and 1 against, so that is granted. Okay, thank you. Lovely. We'll go on to the final item on the agenda for today, item 7D. It's on page 117, by the way. Okay, it's case number 20/0/02233/FUL. It's a full planning application. The proposal is the erection of a 2-storey side extension to dwelling house and provision of a rear patio area with retaining wall. The location is 27 Twentwell View, S17 4PQ. And the officer is Chris Healy again. Okay, Chris, if you'd like to present, please.
Chair, there's nothing to add in terms of supplementary. I'll just very quickly take you through the
thank you.
The proposals. So it's a 2-storey side extension, as you said, with some works in the rear garden. Sorry, oh, there it goes. So this is the property here, the L-shaped one within the red line. This is a cul-de-sac of quite similar properties, as you'll see in some of the images. And the proposal is to put a 2-storey extension here on this side. Aerial photograph that's quite self-explanatory. So the top image is the subject property. The one below is that property showing the neighbour to the left-hand side, number 25. And the 2-storey extension would sit here. it would be 2 meters away from this boundary here at the front, and 0.6 of a meter at the back, because the boundary is splayed. It sits, that's the property from the other side. It's just showing a general kind of street scene. This is a view from the rear of the property, so the extension would sit here. Members who might have visited the site will notice there's a trampoline here.
I'm getting some feedback from somewhere. Has everybody got their on mute, or is it just some background noise?
Seems to have gone now, Chair.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. It's just because you're quite faint. I wanted to make sure we could all hear. Sorry, thank you.
So, the extension goes here, and the rear garden here is being levelled to create a patio area, or a larger patio area. So that's a further image of that. And so down to drawings. This is the as existing. That's the plan, which shows 2 meter gap here to the boundary, 0.6 of a meter here, and the red is the area of extension. 2 stories, and that's a roof plan. So the extension is this bit here. This bit's an existing retaining wall, which is why it looks like it's floating. So it's this portion here and here. And that is about it, Chair. That shows the relationship again between the proposed extension and the neighbouring property as they climb the hill.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we have no speakers on the application, so it goes straight ahead to committee. Any questions at all on the application? No? Okay, any comments on the application?
Straightforward.
Councillor Davidson.
Right, thank you, Chair. Well, it seems fairly straightforward. This I know it puzzled us as to why this has come up, but nobody's come up to demonstrate their objections. So I'm quite happy to, go with the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Just a matter of interest, Chair. Didn't the government some time back say that small extensions didn't require planning permission? Don't these things fall in that category now?
Okay, Chris, would you like to answer that? Do you know why it's come to committee?
Chair, just to answer Councillor Price's question, there's always been a degree of extension, small extensions that can be undertaken without planning permission, often referred to as permitted development. Yes, the government has recently changed and kind of expanded that provision, but this doesn't fall into that category. It does require planning permission.
Yeah, it came to committee because of the number of objections, which is kind of what we do. Yeah, so that is why it's at committee, but yeah, quite rightly so. Do you know? Yeah. Okay, lovely. And no more comments? We can go to the vote. Okay, the officer recommendation is to grant conditionally. Right then, okay, we'll start again. Councillor Sangar, sorry.
4, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Dance.
4, Chair.
Councillor Garbett.
4, Chair.
Councillor McCann.
4, Chair.
Councillor Naz.
4, Chair.
Councillor Rosalind Josephs.
4, Chair.
Councillor Weatherall.
4, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Law.
4, Chair.
Councillor Price.
4, Chair.
Councillor Clarkson.
4, Chair.
Councillor Davidson.
4, Chair.
Councillor Chaplin.
4, Chair.
Thank you very much. I make that 12. That's in full support of the application. So that application is granted. Okay, so next on the agenda, we go through to the appeals and submissions, which I'll hand over to Michael Johnson. Is that correct?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Just a few things to note.
there are 2 allowed appeals at 9 Hollow Gate and 1 on Fulwood Road. That in the agenda, it notes that they were considered by committee. That's not actually the case, Chair. Both of those were delegated decisions, so there's just an error in the agenda there that we just need to minute.
Yes,
The only thing to point out to committee, Chair, is that an appeal's been submitted for 499 Loxley Road. I don't know if members recall, it came to committee. I lose track of time nowadays, Chair. I think it was probably 2019, and it involved the loss of a character building on Loxley Road and its replacement with 2 properties.
the one over Rivlin Valley, looking
Yes,
over the
Loxley Road, 499. Members refused that at committee. It was subsequently resubmitted and refused again under delegated powers by officers. It's just to let members know that an appeal has been submitted. It has just been submitted, so we've got no feedback as to that, but it's just for awareness, really, Chair.
Thought they would.
Councillor Price.
That's all I've got, Chair. I don't know if there's any questions.
Any questions, Councillor Sangard? Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I'm not.
You frozen, Andrew.
Number these. I mean, follow me. Am I frozen?
You did freeze for a second. Well, you did for me. I don't know whether you froze for everyone else. Yeah, you did. You're frozen again. Does anybody else want to ask a question on that while we wait for Councillor Sangard to unfreeze? We know it's nearly Christmas, but you know, no. We'll just give him a second to sort himself out.
Why do you keep so still?
I don't. I know. He's definitely frozen solid, hasn't he?
It is a bane of virtual meetings, though, when your screen freezes up.
Yeah, but I don't think we do too badly.
No, I don't.
You know, we don't at all. Right, I think has he left? Has he left? Has he left us? We'll just give him a second just to come back. Please indulge me, committee. I do appreciate it. And I just want to thank the substitutes as well. You know, Gary and Mike, thank you so much for substituting. I really do appreciate it. And they're long meetings, but they're public meetings, so it's really important.
No, it's good that you're giving this opportunity for people to ask these questions and being patient with people, because
thank you, I appreciate it. And I appreciate you've all been looking after me today, and that was really nice.
He's back. He's back. He's back. Come on, Andy.
He's back. Andrew, where have you been? I've held committee for you. He's got.
I know that's never happened. That's never happened to me.
I know.
On all these Zooms, I'm absolutely shocked. Yeah.
Right,
So,
then, would you like to ask Michael your question?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm just very pleased about the decision on 10 Stumplow Hall Road. I just wondered. I mean, is it about trees and natural setting, and does it mean that we need to think clearly when we've got a TPO? And to give it more weight. But is that the main reason that was why the appeal was being dismissed?
Yeah, Chair, there were 2 principal reasons. I think certainly reading the summary of the inspector's decision, a lot of weight was given to the setting and the impact on trees. It was all, but I think the inspector as well acknowledges that the officer refusal was based on character as well, and it's quite a significant building. And it does sit quite proud in terms of its position on the site and therefore the street. And the inspector, I think, acknowledges that context as well. But certainly, reading the summary, it's very prevalent in terms of the inspector's decision and the impact on trees.
He's gone again, but I think we've all heard, and he can play it back. Okay.
Yeah, I wonder whether if I'll drop Councillor Sanger a separate email to see if
that'd be really kind of you. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, but it was really interesting to hear. Do you know? Yeah. Any more questions on that? No. Okay then. And thank you for the clarification on the minutes on that as well. We certainly would like that doing. you know, amending. Okay, well, the date of the next meeting is Tuesday, the 8th of December, and it'll be our last meeting before Christmas. So feel free to put something nice on. Yeah, and to treat the public, and I promise I won't sing or dance or anything else. Yeah, and hopefully we won't get too many Christmas trees in the background, but you never know, it might be quite nice. Thank you so much, and thank you to the press and public. Pardon?
Bah humbug.
Oh, I'm only joking. Yeah, you can wear whatever you like, Christmas jumpers, the lot, but no alcohol while you're on. No mulled wine, otherwise you're all in trouble. Yeah, but
I'm drinking. That's you as well, Roger.
Hot Ribena, hot Ribena.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's been a really good meeting, and look after yourselves, all of you, and see you again soon. Take care. Bye bye.
Thanks,